Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Hunter. Mind capacity starting from Devil Fruit. Chapter 41. Tap tap tap. The sound of hurried footsteps became increasingly clear. Sudden. Stopped abruptly. All sounds disappeared, and the dark alley returned to silence. In the distance, the red signal flare gradually weakened. But at this moment, the distance is only a few tens of meters. A suspicious and shocked pupil, and an indifferent eyes merged together in an instant. 20 meters away, staring at the two familiar corpses on the ground and the thin figure standing there without hiding anything, Starlu's sinister expression was full of surprise and shock. He never expected that in just 2 minutes, his companion would turn into a corpse and fall permanently in the alley. The other party is obviously just a child. At this moment, Starlu finally noticed the flow of air surrounding the opponent's body. Previous analysis of it was confirmed, but it seems meaningless at this time. Look at each other for a moment. Staring at Huang Quan, Starlu said with a cold expression, Yuli hasn't appeared for such a long time, so he must have died in your hands. Quote. Not far away, Huang Quan raised his head slightly when he heard this and looked at the other party indifferently. Do you think there's any need to talk nonsense? Since we have chosen to fight, the next result will be that only one of us can get out. Either you, or me. The words just fell. Bang! With one step, Huang Quan, who was holding a sharp piece of iron under the explosion of chi, rushed towards the opponent quickly. See this. Starlu, who has always had a sinister personality, was surprised when he saw that there were no signs of traps being set up around him. After thinking about it, he rushed towards Huang Quan. Bang! Under the influence of entangle, the two people, who had enhanced their physical defense, collided fiercely. Next moment, Huang Quan, who was slightly inferior in size, was directly knocked away. However, under the effect of Tangle, he did not suffer much damage. Seeing that the other party was directly knocked away by him, Starlu couldn't help being stunned, and then a cold smile appeared on his face. It seems that the three of them did not die in a direct conflict with you. Is it related to your Nian? How could an opponent who could be knocked away by him so easily kill Fat Yuli and others in a head-on battle? So the answer comes. Is it just that the opponent's Nen was specifically weakened and then killed? Not sure, but it must have something to do with hiding before. Or maybe the other party has helpers. Thinking of this, Starlu looked surprised and remembered Crollo, who had parted with him before. Did that guy follow them in after they came in? Then, they joined forces to hunt. Probably. Looking around in surprise, Starlu shouted with a cold expression, Come out. Crollo. You broke the rules set by the elders, and the price can be easily paid. However, no matter how much he shouted, Crollo never appeared. Stop shouting. Standing up from the ground, patting the dust on his body, Huang Quan said indifferently, Except for the two of us, there are no living creatures here. How can it be? Starlu looked certain and said coldly, Without Crollo's existence, how could a brat like you possibly kill Batty and the others? I originally thought you would be manipulator but turned out to be enhancer. Seeing the other party's stubborn character, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, Since you are so sure, congratulations on your correct answer. Crollo is indeed ambushing around. As long as you can answer me a question, I will let him show up. Do you know the advanced application skills of Nian? Are you talking about Tang? Hearing this, Starlu frowned and said, Kid, if you hand over the nuns now, I can let you go. I see. Confirming the answer in his mind, Huang Quan tensed up slightly and assumed an offensive posture. Looking at the leopard, one can know the whole picture. From the other party's answer, he already knew how many such things the elders had. I just don't know that the three frips, who have stronger chi don't know the information in this regard. What are you doing? In an instant, revealing chi expanded in a circle, and a sinister smile appeared on Starlu's face. His body rioted under the explosion of chi and he quickly attacked Huang Quan. No matter if that guy Crollo is here or not, as long as he kills you, he will definitely come out. He seems to be intelligent, but is he actually a reckless man? After confirming the opponent's ability attributes again, Huang Quan's tight figure suddenly relaxed, and he pressed against him like soft gauze. What's wrong, kid? Are you afraid of a collision? Seeing that the opponent had been dodging and defending his fast punches, Staru mocked and provoked. So this is the only level you have? How did idiots like Yuli die in your hands? There are traces of fighting skills, but not much. In the opponent's defense and dodge, Huang Quan gradually became accustomed to the opponent's attack speed. It was obvious that the opponent did not favor the thought from a certain specialization angle, but tended to strengthen the overall aspect. Although speed, strength, and physique have all been strengthened. But the intensity is shared. If you don't know advanced application skills such as hard, this kind of distribution can only be used as cannon fodder. Thinking of this, while moving his body, Huang Quan extremely calmly resisted every attack from the opponent. The tangle wrapped around his body silently formed transparent white finger gloves between the fingers of his hands. Next moment, once again, he used his left big arm to deflect the opponent's straight punch attack. Huang Quan's eyes narrowed slightly, and the 5 fingers of his right hand moved across the opponent's head from right to left in an instant. Open the door! Open the door! The transparent white finger cots flashed past. In an instant, Starlu's pupils shrank suddenly as he raised his arms to block and defend. However, before he could realize what happened, whoosh! In an instant, his left eye split into 2 halves, one at the temple on the right side and one on the upper side of the forehead, while the right eye and half of his nose went to the back of his head. As if in an instant, his head turned into a spiral, spinning rapidly. Spiral door. Turn thoughts into actions. At this time, the trait is the characteristic of Gate. This is also the key to intelligence in the Nen battle. Calculating mentally but not intentionally, no matter how vigilant Starlu was, he subconsciously raised his arms to defend himself before Huang Quan's information was fully understood. Just this action stopped his death. Ah! Starlu, whose mouth was still intact, let out a surprised and angry sound. You, what on earth did you do to me? It's just a little game. He replied indifferently. Huang Quan had no intention of continuing the nonsense. At the moment when the other party's senses were disrupted, the 5 fingers of his right hand, covered by the transparent white finger cot, passed through the other party's limbs one by one like a magic hand dissecting and suturing. Folding doors. In an instant, Starlu's limbs that had been scratched by thoughts took on a curved, stiff and folded shape like gates that were folded up. So far, facing Staru, whose senses were confused and unable to fight back, Huang Quan calmly opened a palm-sized door at his heart and inserted the sharp iron piece directly. Phew! The sound of flesh and blood being broken was heard. A large amount of blood flowed from the heart. Ho ho ho! Staru's eyes, nose, and ears were still spinning, and blood kept pouring from his mouth, and he could no longer even speak basic words. He fell to the ground, twisting and struggling like a dead fish. After a while, he gradually lost his vital signs. Now, Huang Quan, who did not watch the other party die, was just testing the time that opening the door and chi could hold. Counting his head, limbs and finally his heart, he opened the door a total of 6 times in a short period of time. Correspondingly, the manifest energy outside the body is also consumed in large amounts with the number of times the door is opened. At this time, in just 10 seconds, about 3/4 of his chi had been consumed. We still have to increase the total amount of potential energy. After calculating the results, Huang Quan glanced at the grotesque corpse on the ground and lightly snapped his fingers. Close the door. In an instant, Starlu's body returned to its original state, with only the iron piece left at the heart, which was directly integrated into one body by the restored flesh and blood after closing the door. It's as if the iron piece was born to grow on it, full of weirdness. Seeing this scene, Huang Quan was slightly startled. Unexpectedly, the iron piece that has not been taken out yet will be directly fused and covered by the things when closing the door. This surprised him a little. Stretching out his right hand, Huang Quan held the iron piece thoughtfully and pulled gently. However, the iron piece became one with the flesh and blood, and the muscles and skin were pulled up. What's the principle? Out of curiosity, Huang Quan increased his pulling strength. As a result, Starlu's chest muscles and skin, as well as a small part of the heart inside, were torn and pulled off by him. Looking at the flesh and blood still connected to the iron piece, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with thought. Perhaps, not only opening the door but sometimes the reverse closing the door also has unexpected effects. Ta ta ta. At this time, there was a sudden sound of footsteps. Are there any enemies? Realizing that he could not sustain a battle with his current aura, Huang Quan decisively manifested the Devil's Gate and reached out to touch the air behind him. Suddenly, a rectangular air door was formed in an instant. Despair. With a slight step, Huang Quan's figure quickly flashed into the air gate and then disappeared without a trace. Next moment, ta-ta-ta, accompanied by the sound of footsteps, it is getting closer and closer. Crollo's figure appeared, but at this moment, doubts, shock, surprise and other emotions appeared in his eyes. Especially at this time, when he saw the 3 dead bodies lying on the ground, Crollo's expression suddenly became dumbfounded and extremely surprised. He never expected that in just a few minutes, that guy Quan would be able to take care of these guys who didn't look weak. And, it's still the same. Weird. After carefully inspecting the 3 corpses, especially Starry's corpse, the confusion in Crollo's eyes seemed to burn his brain. He really couldn't figure out how these 4 people were killed. Although there were many fatal wounds on the corpse, Crollo's years of experience had already seen that some of the wounds were cut very deliberately, and it was obvious at a glance that they were deliberately disguised. Who is Quan trying to mislead? Just by relying on these fake methods, you can deceive that guy Uvijin who is full of water. If that guy from Flippo came over, he would definitely find a flaw. Isn't it misleading? But a warning. Shaking his head, Crollo looked at the wounds on the backs of the 2 corpses and fell into deep thought. The fatal injuries were obvious, and brain damage was the real cause of their death, which means, to be able to achieve such results continuously, Azumi's Nen must be biased toward covert sneak attack or forced control abilities, and the hiding effect is very good. Otherwise, it would be impossible for these 2 people to just stand there obediently and let each other kill them. Does this mean that Quan's ability is more towards emitter or transmuter? No. If that's the case, how should this guy explain? Staring at the corpse on the ground with no other wounds, only a torn and damaged heart, Crollo couldn't help but frown, and his confusion became stronger. After a while, when he really couldn't figure it out, Crollo stood up and looked around carefully to make sure that Huang Quan's body and the 2 boxes were not found. The suspicion that the other party left first was confirmed. It's getting more and more interesting, Quan. What exactly is your thought like? Confusion creates pleasure, and the unknown creates interest. Crollo closed the door and enjoyed the mysterious feeling of the unknown, and then turned around and opened the door. For him, exploring the unknown into the known is the greatest achievement in the world. It's a pity. If I could see Fripp's expression when he knew this, it would definitely be more interesting. With an inexplicable smile, Crollo's figure gradually disappeared into the darkness. In a different space. What a wicked guy. What a wicked guy. Seeing the other party's figure disappear, Huang Quan, who witnessed all this, closed his eyes slightly, and while resting, he used Chu to restore his physical strength and Qi as quickly as possible. The reason for hiding was not to meet Crollo right away. One is to try not to expose one's own abilities as much as possible. The 2 are naturally debt collection. Since the fat man Fripp wants others to act according to his rules, Huang Quan, after solving the rules, will naturally not let him go easily. Even if he is not his opponent yet. But for Huang Quan, who has always regarded repaying kindness with kindness and revenge with hatred as his code of conduct, even if he kills the other party at this time, it does not mean that he will let the other party go. At least, charge some interest first. Recalling the collections with thoughts attached to them in the collection room, a coldness flashed in Huang Quan's eyes. I originally thought I would find an opportunity in the future to absorb the thoughts attached to those collections. Now it seems that the interest is not enough to advance the payment without letting the other party bleed a lot. Subsequently, time passes minute by minute. Under the influence of Ju, Huang Quan's physical strength and Qi quickly recovered. Open the air door. Come to the outside world. After glancing at the 4 corpses that had not been collected, Huang Quan threw all of them into the air gate after thinking for a moment. His original plan was to disrupt the intelligence direction of Crollo, Fripp and others. As a result, facing Crollo's series of actions, Huang Quan obviously understood what it means to be smart but misunderstood. After all, before time traveling, he had never killed anyone. Similar measures are just learned from TV and movies. Once it is put into reality, it is often full of loopholes without being tested and tempered. Especially if this is the case, it would be better to let these guys disappear completely. I really don't understand the thinking of those genius criminals. After clapping his hands, Huang Quan identified the direction and walked along many small alleys as close as possible to the castle where Flip was located. Not long after, in the shadow of a house somewhere outside the high rock walls of the castle. Looking at the ancient castle not far away, Huang Quan smiled coldly, holding the Devil's Gate and gently touching it in the void beside him. Air door. In an instant, a humanoid air door large enough to accommodate him emerged and condensed. Crunch. Huang Quan's figure flashed, walked straight into the different space, and closed the air door. The reason why it is so troublesome is naturally because I want to save some gas. If the distance is too far, more chi will inevitably be consumed. In this case, the number of times and time spent using absolute to recover will also be greatly wasted. This is not in line with the efficiency of use. In the final analysis, Huang Quan's potential energy is too low at the moment. Although it can be improved and expanded bit by bit through practice, it takes a lot of time. And now, what Huang Quan lacked was time for development. He also didn't expect that just selling an antique treasure would have to undergo so many inexplicable tests. All I can say is, the guys who can survive in Meteor Street are all mentally abnormal. In a different space, Huang Quan, who had re-entered the green space, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he looked at the several corpses and 2 suitcases still existing in the space. I suddenly thought just now, whether the green space after opening the air door is fixed every time. If not, whether it is storage or other things, the use value will be greatly reduced. However, it is now tested. Fortunately for Huang Quan, the existence of green space is indeed fixed in a sense. In this way, there is no need to worry that when the air door is opened in the future, strange things will appear due to the chaotic connection to other spaces. Ta. Following the sound of footsteps, Huang Quan quickly crossed the 50-meter perspective range and walked quickly towards the dark castle. In this way, perspective space gradually derives the external environment that can be seen through. And Huang Quan's chi quantity is also continuing to decrease a little bit. Not long after, when he felt that chi quantity was 1/3 cautious, he stopped and used absolute to recover. He looked around and saw that it was a maze passage point that he had been to before. If you were in the outside world, you would definitely be stunned. Shaking his head, Huang Quan ignored the various passages displayed by the outside world and walked towards the deepest part of the maze in a straight line after the chi in his body had almost recovered. In terms of the size of the castle, Huang Quan, who had been here before, was certain that the collection room must be deep in the maze. After all, he did not encounter the terrain of going up and down stairs, which means that the collection room must be on this floor. As for why it is in the depths, it was because Huang Quan specially observed it during the return trip. Although before coming, that guy from Flipware took them around many passages, disturbing everyone's sense of memory. But on the way back, those Nen people waiting at each distance clearly revealed the pattern of the maze's route. Sometimes wisdom and stupidity are equated. Huang Quan, who was walking along the green space and used absolute to recover twice, suddenly stopped. Just because the tightly sealed giant steel door was already in front of him. It's a pity that my ability is useless. Shaking his head slightly, Huang Quan held the Devil's Gate and walked through the sealed steel gate as if through penetration. Suddenly, 10 treasures that he had missed for a long time appeared in front of him. However, at this moment, an unexpected scene appeared inside. But Huang Quan's pupils condensed slightly. No wonder I didn't see them outside before. Looking at the 3 frips who appeared in the collection room again, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with surprise. However, the next moment, the surprise on his face turned into surprise. I saw the obese frip and another burly man standing on both sides of Cass with respectful faces, as if they didn't dare to move at all without the other party's signal. What happened? Realizing something was wrong, while thinking, Huang Quan came to the blind corner behind the 3rd purple gold wooden pillar and quietly opened a very small sound storage door. Suddenly, the outside sound was amplified through the storage door. Although it was still weak, it was enough for Huang Quan to hear the conversation between the 3 people clearly. Elder, looking at Cass's back, the fat, Flip, congratulated him very respectfully, it's great to be satisfied with the 2 ancient objects I got today. Kelly, the other burly Balutu, glanced at the other party and said calmly, "You talked a little too much today. Without the elders' permission, who invited that brat?" "I'm not thinking about the elders. Flip, no, to be precise, it was Kelly." Looking at Cass's back, he explained in a panic. "Elders often say that when disguising, you must blend into the character, so I subconsciously try to recruit from the perspective of talent identification. Elder, I, Kelly, have absolutely no evil intentions. Shut up, everyone," as the real Flip came out with a cold voice. Kellel and Balutu closed their mouths one after another, bowing their heads in a respectful posture. "Quite a while. You did a good job today, Kelly." The burly Fripp looked at the 2 purple gold wooden platforms re-erected not far away, as well as the necklaces and shields on them, and said with a cold expression, "These 2 collections are good, and I am very satisfied. However, I don't want to have a second chance of making my own decisions." "Yes." With a respectful response, Kelly trembled, and his plump head couldn't help but hang lower. As a full-time stand-in for so many years, he knew the elder's temperament well. Once the other party gets angry, the consequences will be cruel beyond imagination. Thinking of those cruel scenes, Wei Wei felt a little shuddered. "Barutu." Without looking back, Flip asked coldly, "How are Batty and the others doing?" "Not returned." Feeling the inexplicable pressure from the aura, Balutu said calmly, "But with Batty and Staru sitting in charge, there shouldn't be any problems with the rules. Unless that kid Crollo will deliberately break the rules you set. Find someone to monitor him." Fripp looked cold and said calmly, "If he really dares to break the rules, get rid of all the spiders. Also, I need to collect more genuine items, and inform those gangs and assassin organizations that need talents, so that in future transactions, all the 3-tier ratios will be replaced by antiques and treasures." "Yes, clear." As Kellel and Barutu responded respectfully, Flip once again took a deep look at the many collections in front of him. A trace of joy flashed in his eyes, and he immediately turned around and walked out the door. Seeing this, Kelly and the others hurriedly followed behind, not daring to stop at all. After all, this collection room is the Elder's reverse scale. Once anyone dares to touch it, the best result is to disappear quietly. As for the heavier ones, the 2 of Balutu looked at each other, with a hint of fear in their eyes. Click. At this time, the sound of gears turning was heard. On the right wall of the closed room, when the mechanism is activated, a secret door rises upward, and behind the secret door is a brightly lit passage. Through the bright light, you can see that at the end of the passage is a hidden bookshelf. Ta. Then, Flip, who signaled Kelly to go ahead, pretended to be Cass again, playing the role of bodyguard and guard. Click, click, click. As the secret passage was closed again, the sound of footsteps gradually disappeared into the distance. "This old man beats." After witnessing all this, Huang Quan couldn't help but gasp. It turns out that all the previous guesses and calculations about Flip were completely off track. The real elder is actually someone else. I really want to know what Crollo's expression would be like if he knew this. Thinking of this, Huang Quan smiled and did not go out directly. Instead, he waited quietly for half an hour with an absolute attitude. It wasn't until he was sure that the opponent would not appear again that he slowly stood up and came to the front of the 5th wooden pillar, Black Demon. After thinking for a moment, Huang Quan walked to the 4 dead people and took off the undamaged black uniform jacket and black gloves from the slightly clean body. Afterwards, after putting on his coat and gloves, Huang Quan came to the side of Black Devil again. Through the green space, he could see that the 2 sides were as close as if they were touching each other. Open the door, tap the void lightly, and a long box-shaped air gate is instantly formed. Pulling the air door inward, Huang Quan stretched out his right hand and quickly grabbed the black jade-like hilt of the black demon and then brought it back into the space. Immediately, the air door closed instantly. The whole process takes less than 0.5 seconds. No alarm. Putting the black demon aside gently and steadily, Huang Quan waited calmly for a moment. Seeing that no alarm or other equipment or abilities were triggered, he moved towards the next Polo's armor which was also attached with thread. Go. It's still the same process. Still no alarm of any kind was triggered. 2 pieces, 3 pieces, 4 pieces, until 5 pieces. With doubts and vigilance, Huang Quan got the 5 collections with Nian attached to them one by one. However, when he let his guard down a little and picked up the 6th collection. Beep, beep, the piercing alarm sounded throughout the collection room. Even Fripp and others who were in the living room of the castle at this moment heard the piercing siren. In one moment, the entire castle, both the Nin and ordinary guards, were frightened and moved toward the alarm. And Fripp, who played Cheng Cass, immediately rushed to the secret passage with Batulu and others and rushed towards the collection room. Did someone just sneak in? Cass, who was running at the front, had a look of rage in his eyes. He wanted to see what kind of guy he was that had the guts to steal his things. Really, hearing the piercing siren, Huang Quan's face showed a look of understanding. He had been wondering just now that an old man who had allowed others to impersonate him for so many years, and who had specifically confessed to collect genuine antiquities, would not set up necessary alarm equipment on such an important thing. It's a pity, your speed is too slow. While thinking, Huang Quan kept moving his hands, quickly collecting the 12 collections including the imprisonment shield into the space, and dispersing the air door at the sound of rapid footsteps. Boom! The secret passage that was close to the wall was violently blown away by the huge force with a bang sound. The next moment, Flippu, furious and with a ferocious face, rushed in quickly. When he saw the collection room was empty, not a single item was left. Click, click, click. The sound of teeth grinding violently was filled with chilling murderous intent, and the aura of murderous intent enveloped the entire collection room. Until Balutu and others from the back arrived. Flip, who was accustomed to hiding as Cass, suppressed the feeling of anger and killing, and said expressionlessly to the fake Flip. The thief has disappeared long ago, but in such a short period of time, that guy must not have left. I suggest sealing off the entire castle and the surrounding 500-meter radius to limit and force the other party to appear. Then go find it quickly. The fake Fripp pretended to be extremely angry and roared, "Listen to my order and ask all the guards to seal off the castle and surrounding areas. Find that guy for me. The thief cannot be found. Everyone accepts the rules." Yes. The Nen who followed and stood in the passage immediately responded nervously after hearing this, turned around and ran towards the hall, and at the same time issued blockade orders to their respective guard teams. Not long after, only Flip, Cass and Babalut were left in the collection room. Barutu, seeing that no one else was there, Junflip turned his head and looked at Balutu with bloodthirsty rage coming out of his mouth word by word. Find that guy. Yes, Elder. Clearly feeling the suppressed anger of the other party, Balutu trembled suddenly and immediately activated his Nen without any hesitation. As for Kelly, who was disguised as Fripp, he was like a fat quail at the moment, trying his best to eliminate his sense of existence and not daring to say a word. If he said the wrong thing at an inappropriate time like this, he knew he would definitely die. Just like many predecessors, there are many spare tires like him, waiting to replace him. Different space. Watching this scene, Huang Quan turned his attention to Balutu. From Flip's words, he could tell that this guy's Nen should be related to searching. Is it also related to smell and taste like the guy before? With doubts, Huang Quan's pupils immediately shrank when he saw Balutu's ability appearing. I saw that equipment-like surveillance probes suddenly appeared in the 4 top corners of the nearly 200 square meter collection room. The shape of the monitoring probe is similar to a sphere, with an almost transparent blue appearance, but there are no wire connections around it. As soon as they appeared, they flew towards Balutu's position, and when they returned to 1 meter around him, they seemed to have lost power and fell straight down. Barutu, who had been prepared for this, stretched out his hands to use the 4 surveillance probes one by one, and then arrange them according to the specific 4 corner positions. Hidden Person's Camera. This is Balutu's Nen, and it is also the main reason why he has always been favored by the elders and known for his role. After all, for elders who always like to collect, necessary precautions and insurance measures are just like the number of nemesis they must have. Ready. Under the oppressive gaze of the elder, Balutu wiped the sweat from his forehead and activated the ability of Hidden Person's Camera. Record and playback. As long as what happened that day, he can play it back through the Hidden Person's Camera. The price is that when playing back the record, his eyes will be blind. Just like this moment, As Baruto's eyes gradually dimmed and turned gray, the 4 cameras placed on the ground suddenly emitted blue light, forming a blue projection screen above them. Then, under Baruto's control, the blue projection screen began to regress rapidly. And Flip, who was familiar with the characteristics of Baruto's abilities, was now standing next to the projection, looking at the picture circulating above. Not long after, the projection screen was frozen at the moment when the 12 collections had not disappeared, and then began to play back in time at the normal speed. Seeing this, Flip immediately concentrated his attention and stared at the projection screen. He wanted to see who dared to steal things from him. Just the next moment, seeing the collections disappearing out of thin air in the picture, the murderous intent in Fripp's eyes turned into confusion. Just because the thief seemed to be invisible, without showing his figure at all. I don't know whether she is a boy or a girl, tall, short, fat, thin, age, etc. I don't know at all. This is impossible. Flip opened his bloodshot eyes and growled, "Play. Play it 10 times, 100 times. No one can have both hiding and storage properties. After stealing so many collections, how could that guy disappear? Kyler, go notify everyone and close the encirclement. Even if that guy becomes invisible, we have to dig 3 feet into the ground to find him." Yes. After receiving the order, Kelly responded loudly, and then ran towards the passage with a pretended nervous expression. At this moment, he deeply understood that his life was saved. After all, in the situation where there were only 3 people just now, Baruto's value was higher than his, so he was the only one left to vent his anger. Now that he has the opportunity to run out, Kelly is extremely happy in his heart. As for what kind of results Baruto will have, that's not what he can care about. As a resident of Meteor Street, your own survival is the most important thing. The other side. Ignoring Kelly's departure, Flip looked at the projection screen over and over again with red eyes, not caring about the large amount of chi consumed by Baruto. No. Why? Nothing. The more he looked at the anger in Fripp's eyes, the stronger it accumulated. Interesting. Huang Quan, standing next to Fripp, isolating the space, also looked at the projected screen. Seeing the inconspicuous corner of the black shadow glove inside that only appeared when the collection disappeared, Huang Quan nodded calmly. Although it was an accident with Baruto's nen, the previous caution was indeed correct. Otherwise, if you leave the space and steal, not only yourself, but also the air door will be exposed. As for now, it's better to let this old man taste the angry joy. Snap. Looking at the panic scene outside, Huang Quan did not leave immediately. The most dangerous places are sometimes the safest. The Frippen guy is still here, which means that he will know immediately when the other party finds out or makes any decision. This is the convenience brought by Devil's Gate at the expense of giving up direct damage. Whether it's hiding your whereabouts, gathering intelligence, or assassinating. If he hadn't known that Fripp's chi was far superior to his own, and he hadn't yet figured out what the other party's nen was. I'll put it aside for now and look for opportunities when I get stronger. Glancing at Fripp outside, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he immediately shook his head and looked down at the 12 collections placed on the ground. Among them, there are 5 collections with varying degrees of nyen attached to them. They're Black Demon, Polo's Gauntlet, Golden Cloud Eagle, Blue and White Water Porcelain, and Hillway's Sorrow. Let's start absorbing it from the scroll. Picking up the ancient painting on the ground, the devil patterns in Huang Quan's mind once again entangled news about Hillway's Sorrow. But having seen it once before, Huang Quan held the beautiful scroll in his hands, and the thought of absorbing it came to his mind. In an instant, the faint red-pink reading from the ancient painting followed Huang Quan's left hand and merged into his potential energy. For a time, the potential chi capacity, the size of 2 apples, quickly expanded after being integrated into nyen. After a while, the potential energy volume expanded to the size of 3 apples, which is equivalent to an ordinary red grapefruit. At the same time, the devil pattern showed a series of data, and the psychic capacity expansion of the 6th series also began to change. In this regard, Huang Quan did not check it immediately, but put down the ancient painting, picked up another exquisite blue and white porcelain with water like water, and continued to absorb it. In the following time, except for the Black Demon, the rest of the collection of antiquities with nyen attached to them were all absorbed by Huang Quan. This also caused these antiquities to seem slightly dim, looking like antiques from a long time ago. Qi volume has increased by at least 2 to 3 times. Feeling that the potential qi volume in his body expanded to the size of a volleyball, a smile appeared on Huang Quan's calm face. The feeling of cheating is just different. If you practice according to the normal time, if you want to reach this level, it will take at least more than half a year, right? The feeling of full qi fills the whole body. Moreover, the 50-meter perspective of the green space seemed to expand as his qi increased. From the original 50 meters, it expanded to a radius of 100 meters. This greatly increases the range of Huang Quan's observation of the outside world. There is still dark demon left. Huang Quan picked up the last piece of black demon to be absorbed and covered his eyes with qi. He stared at the rich black nian on the blade and couldn't help but feel a little hesitant. To smoke or not to smoke? The black broken knife is like the cracks of a star mark, like the handle of a black jade knife, its shape is straight and full of incomparable sharpness. It can be said that this black devil is completely in line with Huang Quan's aesthetics, and the sharpness that seems to be able to cut through the soul is indeed what he currently lacks. Once the above thought is absorbed, the result is likely to become, like other absorbed thought items, become ordinary and lose such sharpness. However, if you don't absorb it, Huang Quan was slightly greedy. After all, the nian on black demon was a bit richer than all the nian tools he had absorbed before combined. If he is allowed to absorb it, it will definitely greatly enhance his own qi volume. For a moment, the balance of hesitation swayed in Huang Quan's mind. Quite a while. Keep it for now. After making a decision, Huang Quan looked down at the black demon held in his right hand, then looked up at the collection and 4 corpses around him, thought for a while, and finally slowly walked towards the corpse. Now, he is extremely lacking in lethality, and the sharpness revealed by black demon is exactly what he needs. Then, until you find a weapon that can replace the black demon, keep it for now. Once it is damaged or there is a better weapon, absorb its thought. When necessary, it can also be used as combat reserve materials. I hope your sharpness will not disappoint me. Walking to the corpse, Huang Quan first took off the coat, uniform and gloves that he had taken off earlier, and returned them to the dead fat man. Then he picked up the black devil and cut it down on Yuli's chest. Tear, an extremely subtle sound of tearing and breaking the body. Then, in Huang Quan's slightly condensed eyes, the black demon in his hand was like cutting tofu, deeply slicing the opponent's black uniform, chest and bones below. However, that was not what surprised Huang Quan. But from the wounds cut by the black demon, no blood flowed out at all. Could it be that he has been dead for too long and his blood has coagulated? Pulling out the black devil, Huang Quan was about to find another part to try again. I saw that the deep wound where the black demon queen was pulled out began to slowly seep out traces of blood. Seeing this, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows and repositioned the black demon on the blood. Suddenly, a trace of blood was gradually swallowed by the black demon, and after a while, it was completely absorbed. It turns out that the nian above also has blood-sucking properties. Holding the black demon in front of his eyes, Huang Quan's eyes covered with qi looked deeply at the black nian on the blade. Think for a moment. Huang Quan's whole body exploded with revealed qi wrapped around his body through entangle, and at the same time covered the qi towards the black demon with a high degree of concentration. However, what Huang Quan didn't expect was, it was just a test on a whim, but it directly triggered a drastic change in dark demon. Sizzle. As if being absorbed by a magnet, Huang Quan's qi covering the blade was absorbed by the cracks on the blade. But the absorbed qi did not disappear from Huang Quan's perception, but formed a connection between the cracks. Next moment, click, click, click. A total of 99 blade fragments were separated by qi, as if they were suspended and expanded, which was quite strange. See this. Huang Quan waved the black jade handle in his hand in surprise, and saw the blades moving in the direction of the handle, appearing to be in a state of separation but not falling off. How is this going? In doubt, Huang Quan looked at the devil pattern consciously and read out more detailed information about the black demon. After a while, when he read all the information about Black Devil, he suddenly felt enlightened. It turns out that the foundry master Quetzal who cast you is a manipulator Nen himself. Understand this and how to use Dark Demon. Huang Quan picked up the Black Demon and manipulated the chi that was still in his own induction, but was absorbed by those cracks, and moved it according to his own ideas. In an instant, 99 pitch-black sharp fragments, driven and guided by chi, quickly separated, transformed, and assembled like armor full of mechanical feeling. After a moment, a long, dark and slender knife that was slightly curved like a Tang Dynasty sword appeared in Huang Quan's hand. At this point, the chi he could sense before was exhausted. Call out. The black sword light flashed past. Phew. The body on the ground suddenly had deep knife wounds, and no blood flowed out at all. Still sharp, looking at the Black Demon in the form of Tang Dao in his hand in amazement, Huang Quan didn't know how to express his admiration for the Quetzal caster for a moment. It is actually possible to integrate the 4 systems, including manipulator, conjurer, emitter, and transmuter, into the tool during casting. This resulted in the formation of 3 characteristics: sharpness strengthening, blood-sucking repair, and blade reorganization. I have to say, this is really a genius idea. It's just that in terms of imagination, Huang Quan, a time traveler, can't help but feel a little ashamed. This weapon should not be called a mind tool, but a mind tool. Recalling the thought of absorbing it before, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, somewhat thankful for his thoughtfulness. If you absorb it hastily, it will be a waste of a rare weapon. In Manipulator, it is impossible to embody absolute things, but it can embody things that are close to infinity. Just like Dark Demon. Judging from the information and physical objects obtained, the caster didn't know what kind of casting techniques he used to attach 3 completely different characteristics to each blade fragment in the form of thoughts, thus forming a complete Black Demon. Not to mention its extremely sharp properties, Huang Quan was extremely impressed by the fact that its originally extremely hard blade could repair itself by absorbing blood. It cannot embody absolute things, but it can embody things that are close to infinite. This is indeed reflected in another way on Black Demon. The only thing to note is, every reorganization of the jet black blade consumes a certain amount of chi. It's reasonable and can be considered a relatively light price. After thinking about it, Huang Quan once again input manifestation chi into Black Demon, reorganized it from a slender black long knife into a wrist-like black fragmented gauntlet, and fixed it on his left wrist. Easy to carry and difficult to be found. After testing the Black Demon, Huang Quan took a look at the increasingly mutilated corpse, but his expression remained calm and unchanged at all. After all, the enemy is an enemy. If they can make some contributions after death, they will probably be very happy when they go to hell. Returning to the collection, seeing that Fripp was still staring at the projection, Huang Quan couldn't help but shrugged, and focused his attention on the devil pattern, wanting to see any changes. Power system. Nian. Enhancer. Thought capacity expansion 5%, 7%. Conjurer. Thought capacity expansion 3%, 10%. Transmuter. Thought capacity expansion 4%, 5%. Emitter. Thought capacity expansion 2%, 4%. Manipulator. Reading capacity expansion 10%, 11%. Trait system. Thought capacity expansion 8%, 9%. Note. Conjurer's memory capacity expansion reaches 10%, Conjurer's restriction and oath +1. Seeing this, Huang Quan couldn't help but make a sound of surprise. Although he also thought that after absorbing so many different types of obsessions, there should be a kind of thought capacity that would reach 10%. But I didn't expect that it would be Conjurer with only 3% expansion. However, the trait system, which is about to reach 10%, has only increased by 1%. It seems like the thoughts attached to each mind tool item do have different biases. After testing, a conjecture was confirmed again. After thinking for a moment, Huang Quan glanced at Fripp, who looked violent outside, turned around and walked in the direction he came from. If you want to set up anew restrictions and oaths, this is not a good place. Once there is any impact on this space, he will be the one to deal with the trouble. Go back first. After such a long time, that guy Krollo should be back to the spider soon. Once my disappearance and the theft of Fripp are connected by him, I don't know what troubles will be made later. Thinking of this, Huang Quan couldn't help but speed up his pace. Anyway, with his increased chi, it was enough to last until he left the castle and walked a certain distance. As for Huang Quan simply chose to ignore the collection and 4 corpses on the ground. Although these inconvenient things will stay away temporarily when walking in the green space, as long as he leaves the space and reopens the air door, the original 100-meter space will naturally reappear. At the same time, outside world, Elder Fripp, who had been studying projection for a long time, fell into rage again because he only found a fleeting black shadow when the collection disappeared. Later, the fake Fripp, who originally left to give orders to the outside of the castle, immediately walked towards the collection room in despair after receiving the message that Fripp had summoned him. Not long after, the shrill screams of fear echoed throughout the castle. This made all the guards and Nin people nervous and accelerated the search. After all, no one wants to accept those terrifying rules. Thousands of meters away from the castle, in a dark alley. Buzz! A long transparent door suddenly formed in the air, and with the sound of the door opening creaking, a slightly thin figure walked out of the air. After looking at the silent surroundings, Huang Quan slowly breathed a sigh of relief and adjusted his breathing. The reason why he did not hesitate to waste time and use Ju to restore his physical strength and Qi and walk such a long distance. Naturally, it was because the guards, who were like mad dogs, sealed off the entire 500 meters around the castle very tightly. Moreover, these guys really followed Fripp's order and searched the castle like 3 feet deep. Even the residents of Meteor Street who lived in the surrounding area were not spared, and they broke into the houses one by one to investigate and search. As a result, many violent conflicts occurred. But Nanchang District was Elder Philip's territory after all, so even if someone died due to the conflict, it quickly calmed down. It is truly a Meteor Street that advocates survival of the fittest. Thinking of the scenes he had seen along the way, Huang Quan shook his head, immediately identified the direction, and walked towards the depths of the alley. It is still within the sphere of influence of the Southern District, so the main road must remain unchanged for the time being. Even if he doesn't carry any treasures with him, with the urine of those guys, they might find something to cause a conflict with. Especially the deaths and disappearances of the 4 Yuli people. When Fripp is freed from the incident of the collection being stolen, he might think of this incident. What will happen then, no one can say. We have to find an opportunity to deal with that guy. Thinking of this, Huang Quan frowned slightly. Although there is still some gap in Qi at this stage, it is not as obvious as before. To be on the safe side, you still have to find a way to absorb some telepathy items attached to thoughts. However, it is not easy to find such things. Even Fripp, who manages the southern district of Meteor Street, only has 5 souvenir items in the collection room. You can imagine how others can find them. If it doesn't work, just practice quietly for a while. A large increase in Qi volume requires thorough familiarity and control. While thinking, Huang Quan unknowingly came to a dead end. I still overestimate my sense of direction. Walking to the alley, Huang Quan was surrounded by Qi. The white finger sleeve condensed on his right hand, and then he tapped the rock wall in front of him. Open the door. In an instant, a sliding door made of rock appeared in front of him. Crunch. Holding the door handle, he gently pushed open the rock door. When Huang Quan's figure disappeared behind the door, the rock door completely disappeared. That's all. Huang Quan, who walked in a straight line regardless of the densely packed alleys that resembled a small maze, opened the door and walked through when encountering obstacles or dead ends. Of course, when he meets someone, he will still take a slight detour to avoid attracting attention. Even so, it didn't take him too long to leave the South District, at least about twice as fast as when he came. However, when he entered the dense alley in the East District and was about to enter a dead end to open the door. Sudden. It's a dead end over there, it's impossible to get through. A calm voice with a hint of frivolity suddenly sounded. Upon hearing this, Huang Quan stopped heading towards the dead end and turned his head to look in the direction of the sound. In the shadow of the wall on the right side of the alley entrance, a fair-skinned young man with red hair like a short hedgehog was standing there quietly, seeming to be chewing something in his mouth. Is that so? Thank you. Huang Quan, who felt that the other person looked familiar, nodded calmly. After thanking him, he turned around and walked towards the alley, the only passage on the right. In this way, the moment the two passed each other, you have a strong smell of blood. The red-haired boy stopped chewing, his white nose shrugged, turned to look at Huang Quan's back, and suddenly said, "Is the enemy strong?" This guy." Hearing such a question, Huang Quan paused, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, then turned to look at the other person and said calmly, "Before asking me, shouldn't you deal with the smell of blood on yourself first?" Before he finished speaking, Huang Quan continued walking towards the dark alley, and his figure gradually disappeared. Interesting. Looking at the direction in which Huang Quan disappeared, the red-haired boy had an expression of interest on his face, and then glanced at the dead end on the left with a hint of disgust. "It's much more interesting than these arrogant guys." With a gentle laugh, the figure disappeared into the dark alley. Only deep in the dead end, several scarred corpses fell silently in a pool of blood, and the smell of blood spread to the surroundings. In the alley, Huang Quan, who was far away from the area just now, was still searching for the familiar guy in his mind. Judging from the opponent's figure and age, he should be about the same size as Crollo. He also has red hair, fair skin similar to his own, and a jumping question. Inexplicably, a strange figure who likes to play poker gradually appeared in Huang Quan's mind. Probably not. Thinking of this possibility, Huang Quan couldn't help but look surprised. After all, if it was that guy, he was indeed in this age group now. But, didn't that guy join Phantom Troop after he killed member number 4, Masked Shadow? Why did he appear in Meteor Street so early? Is that guy himself a member of Meteor Street? The more he thought about it, the more doubts arose in Huang Quan's mind. Immediately, he shook his head to dispel these thoughts. If that guy is really Hisoka, if you can become the group leader in the future, maybe you can try to bring that guy in. To avoid the possibility of murder and substitution happening in the future. Of course, the premise is that you can become the leader of Phantom Troop. If he is not fooled, whatever that guy will do is up to him. After all, for such a perverted guy, if you are not careful, you may even become his target. While thinking, the area where the spider is located looms in the distance. Seeing this, Huang Quan thought for a while, turned around and found a deserted corner, opened the air door and took out the 2 large suitcases containing the nuns. Then, after checking the clothing and seeing that there was nothing wrong with it, he left the alley and walked towards the house where the spider was. Far away, Maki, who had been waiting quietly at the door, looked up from time to time and looked around. When he saw Huang Quan's figure appearing in the distance, his eyes suddenly lit up and he ran quickly in the direction of Huang Quan. Spider on the 2nd floor balcony. Crollo, who was paying attention to Maki's movements, also saw Huang Quan's figure appearing in the distance. For a moment, the corners of his mouth gradually curled up. "Did you finally show up? Quan, night falls." Several hours have passed since Huang Quan returned. During this period, he briefly explained the transaction process to Maki and others' inquiries. After that, he used the excuse of accidentally getting lost to send them away temporarily when he didn't return for a long time. Later, in front of everyone, Huang Quan took out 8 million denim and handed it to Picanoden to cover the treatment expenses of Maki Uvajin and others, as well as the corresponding food expenses. After all, medical resources have always been quite scarce in Meteor Street. Spider, on the other hand, can only provide some basic treatment. In order to speed up the recovery of injuries, there is a huge demand for medical supplies in the absence of a hospital. In addition to the daily meals for so many people, Huang Quan can understand the pressure Crollo will have, especially now that there are many injured people. Although Huang Quan has not joined the Spiders for the time being, Maki is still a member of the Spiders after all. He will not take Maki back to his original residence until Black Jackal's situation becomes clear. If something unexpected happens and the other party dies, he wasn't sure what he would do next. Anyway, give most of the remaining ring nuns to Maki and let him manage and use them by himself. If 8 million is not enough, he can collect it from inside. What he didn't expect was, because of such an unexpected move, Franklin and others who were not very familiar with him couldn't help but give a thumbs up. To this, Huang Quan just waved his hand and turned back to the arranged room. For him, as long as Devil Pattern is there, he will encounter more collections sooner or later. Even if there are shortcomings, he just has to choose the buyer. For example, there are 11 collections in Air Door at the moment. He definitely couldn't take action in Meteor Street unless he could get rid of that old guy Flip. Let him breathe for a while. Sitting on the simple and tidy bed, Huang Quan closed his eyes slightly. The constraints and oaths that were expanded today have not been used yet. Now it is time to think carefully about how to formulate. At this time, knock knock knock, there was a sudden knock on the door. Thinking it was Maki, Huang Quan slowly opened his eyes, stood up and opened the locked wooden door. Yo, the greeting sounded, and the person who appeared outside the door was not the Maki he expected, but Crollo with a smile on his face. This guy. Looking at Crollo, a series of thoughts flashed through Huang Quan's mind, finally settling on the corpse and theft. Obviously, Crollo, who appeared in front of him with a smile on his face at this moment, must be related to these two things. His expression remained calm and unchanged. Huang Quan looked at Crollo, who was half a head taller than him, and asked calmly, "What's the matter?" "Let's talk." Crollo glanced at the room behind Huang Quan, smiled slightly and said, "You don't mind if I come in and sit? This is your territory, so of course there's no problem." Turning sideways to let Crollo enter the room, Huang Quan did not close the door, but casually leaned against the door and said calmly, "Tell me, what do you want to ask?" "This is quite sudden. I just wanted to chat with you for a while." Looking around the empty room, a strange color flashed in Crollo's eyes, and he asked casually without looking back. "By the way, did you take away the Elder's collection? I do not understand what you are saying." After hearing this, Huang Quan looked calm and said calmly, "Elder collection? Which elder are you talking about?" The prerequisite for making a surprise statement is that the two of them need to have an in-depth conversation. Crollo. "So you don't know yet?" Seeing that Huang Quan's expression remained unchanged, the smile on Crollo's lips became more obvious. At this moment, he was certain that the disappearance of the Elder's collection must be related to this guy. Through the relevant information he collected, Quan Ke has never come into contact with other elders. Interesting. Sitting next to the chair by the window, looking at the scenery outside, the smile on Crollo's face gradually disappeared, and he said calmly, "Whether it was you who did it or not. Until Uvijin and the others have fully awakened to mind, it is best that those collections not appear in Meteor Street." Quote. After a moment of silence, Huang Quan frowned and said calmly, "Is that all you want to say?" "I'm here to discuss cooperation." The thief's ultimate intention appeared out of thin air. Crollo touched the cover of the book and said calmly, "A cooperation that can completely eliminate hidden dangers." Oh, raising his eyebrows, Huang Quan looked at Crollo and said calmly, "What should I say? Completely eliminate obscurity. Is this guy hinting at the Fripp guy, or the profit distribution war mentioned last night?" "It's related to Fripp, and it's also related to the profit distribution war." As if he had guessed what Huang Quan was thinking, Crollo said calmly, "After all, once Fripp dies, the profit distribution war will naturally begin. There are only 4 seats at the top of Meteor Street. There are always people who want to sit on them and try out what it feels like. Are you so sure that you can kill Flip?" Huang Quan looked at Crollo meaningfully. "That old guy is so easy to deal with. The large number of Nin people alone makes it difficult for people to get close. This is why I invited you." Crollo looked calm and stared at Huang Quan. "I've seen all the bodies of those guys, plus those collections that disappeared inexplicably, but I didn't find any information about the thieves. Obviously, your Nen is even better than I thought. And, the most important thing is, Flip's collection has disappeared, which means that he will not give up on the Yuxin City auction in 4 months. And this is the best time to get rid of him. Why do you want to kill him so much?" Hearing this, Huang Quan's eyes narrowed slightly and asked, "It's just a threat at the beginning, shouldn't it make you want to get rid of him so much, right?" "The reason, what is that?" There was a strange color in Crollo's eyes, and the veins in his right hand holding the thief's ultimate were slightly bulging. "Don't you think it would be particularly interesting to hunt down an elder to celebrate the founding of the brigade? He once made me run away in embarrassment, and now I use his life as the price. Isn't this a very reasonable, pleasant thing? What do you think, Quan?" "It's really reasonable." Seeing this, Huang Quan glanced at Crollo, who had a strange expression, and said calmly, "But, before we cooperate, I can reveal an important piece of information to you for free." Crollo heard this and asked in confusion, What information? The Fripp we met. Huang Quan looked at Krollo and said meaningfully. As fake. For a moment, Krollo seemed to freeze on the spot, with shock and thought gradually appearing in his eyes. The place that has always felt strange is actually here. Just a few words. All the doubts that had been ignored flashed in Krollo's mind. A character that changes repeatedly. The smell that comes and goes. The strange feeling every time we meet. All the details are connected together as if connected by a rope. It seems like, after thinking for a while, the shock in Krollo's eyes gradually faded, and he stared at Huang Quan. You already know who the real Fripp is. That's right. Huang Quan looked calm and said calmly, do you remember that guy named Cass? Cass. Hearing this name, a tall and burly figure appeared in Krollo's memory. Suddenly, he was slightly surprised and said, are you talking about the Nen who has been standing silently behind Flip? It could actually be him. But how is that possible? Obviously, that guy has only been serving as a guard beside Flip for less than 2 years. Huang Quan's eyes narrowed upon hearing this, and he repeated, you mean, that guy appeared next to Flip in less than 2 years? Yeah, how? Before he finished speaking, Krollo looked slightly stunned, and then said calmly, I understand what you mean. You suspect that Cass is both Flip and not Flip, is that right? Unable to determine at the moment. Recalling the scenes about Fripp, Huang Quan recalled them carefully and repeatedly, and finally settled on Baruto, who seemed to be nervous, but his eyes were always calmly watching all the movements in the room. Do you think there is a possibility? Thinking about the details of the scenes, Huang Quan pondered, Flip is not one person, but many people. What do you mean? Stunned, Krollo frowned. Do you want to say that Flip divided himself into many people? Or is Flip divided into many people? Well, do you know the nature of emitter? Huang Quan pointed out. You can inject your own thoughts into the target's body to form corresponding control. At this moment, he also realized why Fripp and the others were watching the projection one after another. It turned out that they wanted to use this to create a loophole for the thieves. From the moment you enter the collection room, those guys are already acting. If we say that they are all controlled by the real Fripp, they are just like one person. Does this mean that these old men have been directing and acting from the beginning to the end? For a time, more and more thoughts emerged in Huang Quan's mind. Emitter, well, touching the red book unconsciously with his left hand, Krollo thought calmly, it seems that the collection and number of people guessed before have nothing to do with the Nen of that guy from Flipur. Could it be that guy is really just keen on collecting antiquities? On the contrary, shaking his head slightly, Huang Quan said calmly, I think the connection between them may be, to some extent, an expansion of Flip's abilities. If Fripp is really a nemesis of emitter based on my observation of them, it should be reflected in the manipulation of numbers. Do you think it's possible to precisely control a target without revealing any flaws and moving freely without paying the necessary price? Price, collection, number of people. Krollo stared. If the price is quantity, then Fripp's extreme enthusiasm for collectibles is indeed understandable. Another point. Pointing at Krollo and himself, Huang Quan nodded and said, I suspect Flip's ability is related to acting. For example, the better you act, the easier it will be to control the target. It is indeed possible to play. Krollo recalled his encounters with Fripp over the years, with a thoughtful look in his eyes. Especially the indescribable weird feeling every time we meet, it is indeed a bit like a puppet-like stiffness. Of course, all this is just my guess. Turning back to the previous topic, Huang Quan said calmly, if he really decides to take the Fripp memorial flag, then he will not be able to let go of any of the nuns around him. Presumably you can't tell who his true identity is, right? Once we let him escape, we will be the ones facing crazy revenge. This does not conflict with my previous plan. Krollo thought for a moment and said calmly, the time remains unchanged, it is still 4 months later, that is, the Yushan auction in September. Regardless of whether the collection is related to Fripp, with his enthusiasm for antiquities, this guy will definitely go there when the time comes. After all, even emitter cannot cross too long distances to manipulate the human body. Even if it is possible, the price and consumption must be very high. Based on my speculation about his character, the other party must go to Yuxin City in person to participate in the auction. At that time, As long as all the entourage is recorded, we will naturally find a way to find out the other party's true identity. What needs to be done is to find a way to deal with him. Speaking of this, Crollo took a deep look at Huang Quan. The premise is that your ability is as good as I imagined. Bang bang bang. Ignoring Crollo's probing eyes, Huang Quan clapped his hands and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. I don't know if you've heard of the saying that plans can't keep up with changes. What if that guy from Flippo doesn't plan to go to Yushing City to participate in the auction? What will you do? He will definitely go. Crollo raised his head slightly and said, he has been going to Yushing City every year for so many years, and this year will certainly be no exception. If the accident you mentioned does happen, then let's deal with it together with everyone in the castle. In this way, nothing troublesome will happen. This guy, what a crazy character. Seeing Crollo's indifferent and calm expression, Huang Quan subconsciously overlapped it with the figure of the future leader of Crollo. It has to be said that those who can survive and make a name for themselves in Meteor Street do have different thoughts and ideas from ordinary people. Your idea is crazier than I expected. Without hiding anything, Huang Quan pointed it out directly. It seems that Uvijin and the others are also included in your calculations, right? Certainly, Crollo smiled. As a member of the future brigade, of course it will be more fun if everyone joins in to establish it, right? What a twisted fun. Huang Quan looked calm and said, do you really believe that Franklin and the others can successfully awaken mind without losing their life energy and drying up? After all, getting through aura nodes and awakening by fright are different from awakening by exercise. Death will occur if you are not careful. Get through aura nodes, awaken by fright, awaken by exercise. Crollo heard this and thought a little. These names are quite interesting. Shouldn't the awakening thought be to directly inject chi into the bodies of ordinary people and let them awaken on their own? Although I don't understand what you're talking about. Uvijin, Nobunaga, Pike Notan, Franklin and others are all my chosen companions over the years. I believe that with their character and talent, there is no possibility of failure. Quote. Hearing this, Huang Quan shook his head and closed his eyes slightly. You are more confident and crazy than I expected. Just like what I mentioned last night, aren't you worried that your position as future leader will be taken away by me and you will be suppressed by me? If you can do it. When Crollo heard this, an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. I look forward to the unknown future. If you are better than me, even if you follow your rules. Of course, the premise is that you don't make me too bored. I hate boring things that are complicated and known. If the future of the brigade becomes boring in your hands, it won't be my turn to take action. Is this a threat? Huang Quan narrowed his eyes slightly. You like the unknown, don't you? It's just what I want. For me, everything in this world is unknown. I hope you won't be left behind in this process. Each other. Crollo's eyes narrowed slightly and he looked at Huang Quan without giving in. For a moment, there seemed to be a void aura between the two. Quite a while. I agree to cooperate. Huang Quan closed his eyes again and said calmly, but, once there are signs of failure, I will act according to my ideas. After all, Fripp itself is my goal. Then, standing up slowly, Crollo nodded and walked towards Wenwei. During this period, I will try my best to collect and complete the information that I missed before. I hope to see your wonderful performance on the day we form a group. Each other. Passing by, Huang Quan slowly closed the wooden door, looked at Crollo's back, and raised the corners of his mouth slightly. Having such an opponent actually gave him an inexplicable and urgent sense of competition. He originally had only a few ideas about the position of brigade leader, but suddenly he became somewhat interested. Interesting. After closing the door lock, Huang Quan shook his head with a smile, turned back to the bed and sat down. Interest is just interest after all. The most important thing now is to strengthen your own strength. Otherwise, everything is just a delusion. Let's start. Looking down at the chi entwined in his hands and body, Huang Quan looked focused and fell into thought. Since constraint and oath is expanded from the mental capacity of conjurer, it naturally has a fixed bias like the last manipulator. This means that the restraints and oaths set this time must be within the nature of conjurer. Thinking of this, Huang Quan couldn't help but recall the information about conjurer in the original work. The main characteristic of conjurer is that it can change the nature or shape of the generated chi. As long as you want to change the nature of your thoughts, you will generally use this type of attribute system, which is also the essence of conjurer. Of course, no matter how you change chi, it still belongs to the nature of energy. In addition, the chi of conjurer is mostly soft and malleable. In addition to the properties of the chi it chooses, it can also shape various tools and items. Just like Hisoka's rubber and chewing gum properties, Killua's electrical properties, and future Maki's suture properties. According to the essence of conjurer, it is still the range of remaining energy. What has changed is the characteristics of chi itself. In other words, it is to attach various different characteristics to chi, such as blood-sucking, flames, sharpness, springs, electric current, etc. According to each person's physique, specialties, hobbies and tendencies, etc., the nature of chi can be changed. Then what kind of characteristics should my chi have? At this moment, Huang Quan remembered the characteristics of the door that had been in chi from beginning to end. Although in Mizumi Shiki and Devil Pattern door belongs to the trait system, it is indeed very similar to conjurer to a certain extent. So, should we develop another conjurer feature, or should we make changes and additions based on gate? Thinking of this, Huang Quan carefully analyzed the conjurer nen who appeared in the original work. The most prominent ones are Killua, Hisoka, Maki and Phaeton. Especially Killua's electrical characteristics, its cool and powerful properties, are unforgettable for anyone who has seen it. However, after all, the opponent has been tempered by electric shock since he was a child, so that chi can change the nature of electricity, and in the early stage, his own chi must be charged and stored by electric shock every time. This alone is beyond the reach of ordinary people. At least, Huang Quan has no habit of self-abuse yet. And Hisoka's chewing gum properties. Huang Quan thought for a while and couldn't help but think of the red-haired boy who looked like Hisoka he met before. At that time, the guy seemed to be chewing something. From this point of view, it may be something like chewing gum. It is because of hobbies and experiences that the nature of thought is changed into the characteristics of chewing gum and rubber. In this way, Huang Quan can still understand Maki's silk thread properties, but how did Phaeton develop the scorching thoughts properties like the sun? In the final analysis, it still has to do with will. After comprehensive analysis of all relevant intelligence, Huang Quan came to a conclusion. Only a strong bias of will and an extreme tendency of emotion can make chi change in that direction. To a certain extent, this actually does not depart from the scope of restrictions and oaths. Thinking about this, looking at the chi wrapped around him like water vapor, Huang Quan thought for a while and finally decided to use the gate as the base point and develop other characteristics on this basis. As for setting up another type of nen, there is no need to consider it for the time being. Too complex abilities often lead to mediocre results. Although he can grow up very quickly with the help of devil marks, this does not mean that he will waste opportunities in the early development stage and make other unnecessary attempts. Although when he knew that he came to the hunter world, without knowing the gate, what he yearned for was an ability like flower in the mirror, moon in the water. The plan can't keep up with the changes. Sighing slightly, Huang Quan focused on the chi in his hand, thinking about the direction in which the door should change. Electricity, flame, rubber, metal, hurricane, healing, blood-sucking, rebound, sharp. A series of imaginary characteristics that can or cannot be related to the gate flashed in Huang Quan's mind one by one, and then he dispelled one by one those that were too conceptual and could not be set for the time being. Finally, this leaves only two feasible feature directions. They are the material of the door and the weight of the door. Chapter 51. The material of the door. Huang Quan analyzed it carefully. If you think about it from the perspective of conjurer, it can be divided into metal properties, wood properties, rock properties, ice properties, etc. All materials that can be made into doors can be included in the materials. And towards the weight of the door. It is nothing more than derived from light characteristics and heavy characteristics. This is somewhat conceptual, but it is quite relevant to gate. Since this is the first time I try conjurer, let's first try to see if it can be more conceptual. Wait. If it doesn't work, simplify it and separate it into light and heavy. If it still doesn't work, consider extending that material. Quote. After making a decision, Huang Quan concentrated his attention, stared at qi, condensed it and gathered it in his hands. At the same time, he used the concept of weight in the form of thoughts to influence, transform, and attach to qi. Moreover, firmly establish the restrictions that you have thought about in advance in your heart, and make an oath with concentrated and strong thoughts. Sizzling. The transparent white qi, like a soft air mass, expanded and contracted from time to time in Huang Quan's increasingly intense thoughts. Repeatedly, until Huang Quan felt qi, it gradually became heavier like an expanding iron block, and gradually became lighter like shrinking paper hairs. And the white qi also turned into an entangled color of black and white. There is white in black, and black in white. Black represents weight, white represents lightness. Realizing that he had successfully changed the nature of qi, a rare smile appeared on Huang Quan's face. Sure enough, for the omnipotent Nian, strong will is the key to determining the manifestation of ability. Of course, this also requires the tolerance of gate characteristics and the coercion of restrictions and oaths. Think of this. Huang Quan stretched out his left hand, revealed the pure white and emerald green Devil's Gate, and then turned it directly to the third page. Open black lens bracket conjurer, undecided. Ability characteristics. Heavy, light. Effect. When using qi, the amount of energy that enhances black energy will increase in weight, and the amount of energy that enhances white energy will decrease. The weight characteristics that can be strengthened are based on the consumption of thought energy. Restrictions. When using light and heavy thoughts, your body weight will change with the change of weight. Oath. Once the weight returns to a negative number, this ability will continue to weaken until it disappears. The price of this restriction and oath, in general, is mainly aimed at the weight of Huang Quan's own body. If we use this to form constraints, we can form a relative rule connection for the concept of weight, and only then can we derive the conceptual characteristics of light and heavy. In this way, Huang Quan can clearly feel the change in weight and use it accurately. As for the pledge that the weight will be a negative number, this is a warning. Warn yourself not to adjust the weight excessively. After all, once the weight returns to a negative number, it is unimaginable what changes will occur to his body. Instead of doing this, it is better to restrain yourself first to avoid some unexpected troublesome phenomenon. Call out. Putting away the Devil's Gate, Huang Quan wrapped his body around the black and white qi and stood up slowly. Then his thoughts were concentrated in the black qi, increasing the consumption of manifestation qi. Not long after, click, click, click. As the black qi continued to be consumed, the qi around Huang Quan quickly became heavier, and before long, it reached more than twice his own body weight. Seeing this, Huang Quan stopped gaining weight and took a few tentative steps forward. It turned out that the weight had indeed increased, but it had little impact on his actions. Not as sluggish as expected, it's like my weight is born this way, and I don't feel out of habit at all. Next is the light feature. Through the effect of Nian, my weight was reduced by more than half in a short time. If Huang Quan's weight was around 100 kilograms before, it is now 50 kilograms. With nearly half of his weight, Huang Quan became extremely light, as if he could soar to the sky with just a little step of his feet. Weight changes, but it has no impact on physical strength. Repeatedly tested, light and heavy. Huang Quan memorized the impact of weight changes, and gradually figured out how to use it. Whether it is on oneself or on the target external object, anything that is covered and touched by the black and white qi will be affected by the weight transformation. It can be called weird. After thinking about it, Huang Quan decided to name it Gate of Light and Heaviness. After all, it is derived from the characteristics of gate. It is simpler and clearer. It will be much more convenient for other abilities in the future and can be remembered clearly. After deciding on a name, Huang Quan began to learn about the light and heavy characteristics of light and heavy gate and began to adapt to various weights, striving to master the changes in weight. At the same time, daily practice on various application skills of Nian, and finally reorganize Black Demon into various weapons, and become proficient in the basic skills of using weapons. Special daggers and long knives are the focus of Huang Quan's training. There is no other reason than that they feel particularly comfortable when using them. As for other forms of weapons, the main thing is to understand the angle of attack. In this way, in the following time, whenever Huang Quan felt a little tired, he would use Ju to recover, and then train Tangle Lien and Fa. When Fa is almost done practicing, he turns to the use of weapons. This cycle was repeated until 2 or 3 o'clock in the night, and then he fell into light sleep in an absolute way. South area, Castle Collection Room. From now on. Looking at the bloody and gray-eyed Kelly in front of him, Flippu, who still looked like Cass, wiped the blood on his hands and said coldly, "Find time to dispose of the body and let Yi Nai prepare the next replacement. You shouldn't have killed him." Baruto changed his previous panic, and his eyes showed the same coldness. Even in Yi Nai's hands, there aren't many substitutes left. Then let him find a way. Cass said slightly impatiently. With Baruto's ability, there is no way to retrieve those collections. Once time passes, you know better than me what will happen next. What's the difference between you and me? Baruto mocked. Before developing Nen, did you ever think that your spiritual personality would be divided into so many parts? The longer I act, the less I miss myself. You talk too much nonsense. Cass glanced at it and said calmly, if those collections cannot be retrieved as soon as possible, the stability of the other personality associations will completely collapse. At that time, not only me, but all personalities including you will be assimilated by the original owner of the body. At that time, it will become unknown who will take the lead. This is the price of having a big appetite. Baruto heard this and said calmly, among us, only Yuli has the search type Nen. With his sensitivity to smell, he will definitely be able to find the guy who stole the collection. But it's a pity, because of the rules you set, that guy disappeared. Missing. Cass frowned and said, what do you mean, were they dealt with by that kid named Quan? When did it happen? There is no one else here, don't ask questions knowingly. Baruto said calmly, since Yuli has been missing for so long, he can be judged dead, and the probability of survival is quite low. And even if you find it, you may not be able to find traces of the thief. So if you want to stabilize the dominant position of personality, you must find a collection of antiquities of corresponding specifications. You're talking about Ukexan auction, right? Hearing this, Cass frowned and said thoughtfully, I have considered this matter, but 4 months is too long, and authentic treasures are not so easy to find. Don't tell me that you forgot the 2 brats you met today. Bataru said meaningfully, Kalier's test results on them do not mean that they are their true identification level. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, a month passed quietly. Since receiving this huge sum of more than 20 million, Huang Quan has focused his energy on spiritual practice except for occasionally going to the garbage dump to try his luck in finding spiritual tools. The most effective way to increase Qi volume is to use practice to overdraw Qi, thereby forming a bit-by-bit recovery and increase accumulation. Tangle Ju Lien Fa. This is the most basic application control of Qi. After all, for the Nin, the smooth control of Qi is the most basic condition for the Nin. And if you want to become a world-class Nin who is above the first class, the most important thing is to be able to freely condense Qi volume to any part of the body at any time, while minimizing the condensation time as much as possible. This is an advanced application skill. Just like condensation, because it has been covering Qi to the eyes, it has been completely mastered by Huang Quan. As for other advanced applied technologies, although his memory was slightly vague, Huang Quan still researched it based on the instructions in the original work and came up with a rough idea. Among them, condensation, Zhou, and yin are basically familiar to me. And round, firm, hard, flow. Although Huang Quan is not sure whether what he has researched is correct, judging from the use effect, it is indeed very similar to the slightly vague impression in his memory. Of course, research comes out. In terms of use, it still seems very awkward due to time constraints. If you want to achieve the effect of proficiency or above, you still need to continue to practice every day. In addition, the reorganization and use of Black Demon and the familiarity with the light and heavy characteristics, especially since the restrictions on weight changes with characteristics are formulated, are the top priorities during practice. At the same time, during this period, the recovery of Maki, Uvajin and others from their injuries was better than Huang Quan expected. After all, they spent a lot of money to obtain medical supplies. In addition, their physiques are generally stronger, so recovery took longer than expected. Much less. Moreover, everyone among the spiders, except for Shizuku, who was arranged for a normal exercise awakening due to his young age, everyone else has stepped into the threshold of Nen one after another. As Huang Quan expected, with the qualifications and talents of these guys, none of them died due to failure to awaken mind. To this, the countdown begins. These were the meaningful words Crollo left in Huang Quan's ears when everyone crossed the threshold of Nen. I hope you won't be disappointed. This was the response left by Huang Quan at that time. There are still about 3 months left until the establishment of Phantom. Both sides are looking forward to what interesting things will happen when the time comes. And now, the most important thing is to improve your strength. Not only him and Crollo, but also Uvajin and others. After all, if you want to become a leader who stands above these people, without the ability to defeat the others or the corresponding resourcefulness, it is all empty talk. For a time, the entire spider's nest was immersed in a spiritual atmosphere. Even the most basic collection of supplies has changed from daily to occasional. For those born in Meteor Street, the most annoying thing is falling behind other peers when seizing opportunities. Because this will only appear that they are incompetent and lazy. No one wants to be left behind while others advance. In this way, time passes quickly. More than 2 months passed by in a flash. Outside Meteor Street, there is a rocky area not far from Districts 7 and 8. Now, Maki, Nobunaga, Shalnark and Shizuku were standing 30 meters away, concentrating on the 2 people fighting in front of them. Are you sure you want to change arm wrestling to fighting? Looking at Uvajin, whose muscles were obviously bigger than 3 months ago, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "Are you sure you can defeat me? How will you know if you don't try this thing?" Uvajin grinned and said confidently, "I should have ended the agreement 3 months ago. It took so long, so I should repay you for the cheating meal that day." Cheating? It seems you are still not convinced. Taking off his black trench coat, revealing the long sleeves of the white shirt underneath, Huang Quan turned his wrist and said calmly, "Uvajin. Sometimes there is a big gap in talent between people. Even in terms of time, my chi is higher than yours." That being said, he was quite interested in this battle. After all, before awakening thought Uvajin was able to rank first in spider arm wrestling with his amazing strength and endurance, although he later lost to him. But after awakening mind and after 3 months of hard work and practice, the other party must have made great progress. Thinking of this, the interest in Huang Quan's eyes became more intense. "Quan, stop talking so much nonsense and let's get started." Uvajin grinned ferociously, and his diffuse afro looked like a lion, filled with the oppressive feeling of a predator. At the same time, the muscles all over his body swelled and tightened, and as his will was driven, a large amount of steam-like chi erupted from his body aura nodes and was skillfully covered with wrap around his body. Even Jian learned how to apply it independently. Seeing this situation, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with surprise. He was certain that the advanced application skills he had calculated based on the original work had not been taught to any of Spider's followers. The so-called strength is an advanced application technique that combines Tangle and Lien. It mainly uses Lien to emit a large amount of chi and then uses Tangle to bind and cover it so that a more powerful force can be formed. Defense and attack power. Only, unexpectedly, Uvajin could use his own talent to figure out this set of skills in just 3 months. He is truly gifted. Could it be that it has something to do with the other person's natural enhancer? No, it should be related to the opponent's terrifying strength and endurance. After all, if you want to use Jian, you have to maintain the practice state all the time. In this state, your physical strength and chi are extremely consumed. Think of this. As you wish. Open black lens bracket Jian close black lens bracket. Looking at Uvajin, Huang Quan's body sank slightly and tensed up, using practice to expand the aura nodes throughout his body, creating a large amount of chi and then skillfully covering his whole body with Wang. Bang! Uvajin, who had been impatient for a long time, saw the airflow visible to the naked eye from the spring. He immediately grinned and exploded with his right foot. The chi formed a strong thrust under the foot, causing the ground to be exploded with micro pits. At the same time, his burly figure was like a bullfight. Like this, he rushed towards Huang Quan. As expected of the enhancer, my head is full of water. Seeing that the opponent's offensive was straight, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, turning his consciousness to the black in the black and white qi. In an instant, he turned on the heavy feature, increasing the weight of the qi covering himself to 300 kilograms, and his weight also followed. Rapid changes. Then, looking at Uvijin, who was approaching less than 2 meters away from him, Huang Quan calmly stretched out his right hand and waited for the opponent's aggressive attack. Not far away. Why doesn't Quan hide? Seeing that despite Uvijin's violent impact, Izumi still stood there quietly, Maki and others expressed doubts, wondering what Izumi wanted to do. However, they didn't have to wonder for long. Next scene. Bang! The sound of violent collision echoed all around. The results presented made their pupils shrink sharply, and the shock in their eyes seemed to be revealed uncontrollably. What a joke! Are you kidding me? Not only Maki, Shalnark and others, but even Uvijin at this moment couldn't help but look suspicious of life. Just because Uvijin, who was hitting with all his strength, was forced to stop by Huang Quan's extended right hand in an understatement. Don't be in a daze. Seeing the other party's stunned look, Huang Quan frowned and kicked his right leg out sideways. Bang! It was obviously just a kick from a weak body, but Uvijin, who suffered the blow, flew backwards as if he had been hit hard by a huge hammer. Really? Huang Quan frowned, thought for a moment, and restored Nen's heavy characteristic to its original state, only maintaining its hard state. After all, the other party has only practiced for about 3 months, which is indeed not enough time for the other party to develop its own Nen. Before, he paid too much attention to. Next, just maintain the normal fighting level. Thinking of this, Huang Quan waved to Uvijin, who fell to the ground not far away, and said calmly, since you haven't developed Nian yet, then use Qi to carry out normal offensive and defensive battles. Ha! On the ground, Uvijin jumped up suddenly and said with surprise, is that your ability just now? No wonder I can't hit you at all. About hair, I have explained it to you before. As he spoke, Huang Quan's body became more and more condensed. Come on, don't waste time. That's right, fighting should be. Hearing this, Uvijin grinned, his body rioted again, and he rushed towards Huang Quan quickly. His left and right hands were clenched into fists, like large sandbags under the blessing of Qi. Enjoy it. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a Qi fist seal on his right side, and he blasted straight towards Huang Quan, full of momentum thanks to the speed of the attack. However, see this. Huang Quan's expression was indifferent, without any change. He just stepped forward abruptly, and the elbow of his left arm covering Qi hit the joint between the opponent's right forearm and upper arm in a truncated manner, thus causing it to lose its strength and shoot high to the upper right side. Immediately, Huang Quan turned around, his body suddenly turned to the back of Uvijin, and kicked the opponent's figure hard in the back. Boom! After suffering a heavy blow, Uvijin relied on his rich combat experience to roll forward and down, rolling like a donkey to remove the inertia of his body. Then, without waiting for his body to stand firm, he pounced directly on Huang Quan like a vicious bear. At this stage, Uvijin only knows how to cover the body with manifestation Qi, but he doesn't know how to apply techniques such as hardness to gather Qi in fists. Under such circumstances, the power he can exert comes from the balance enhanced by himself and Jian. And this point naturally caught Huang Quan's eyes. Of course, even so, he would not be so stupid as to disperse Jian and use Tangle to defend against the opponent's attack. Once the concentration of Qi is too different, it will not only cause damage to the muscles and bones. What's more, Uvijin's own strength and endurance are far superior to ordinary people. Too slow. Uvijin. This time, facing another clenched fist attack from Uvijin, Huang Quan raised his eyebrows. Instead of using his skills to dodge, he also used his clenched right fist to attack the opponent. The next moment, bang, a violent collision sounded. 2 fist seals, one small and one large, collided and became deadlocked without giving in. A manic flow of air suddenly exploded between Qi and Qi, tilting towards the surroundings. Roar! Feeling the fighting feeling he wanted, Uvijin let out a roar of excitement with his face full of excitement, and his figure faintly pressed forward, hoping to bring more strength to his arm. See this. Huang Quan's calm eyes narrowed slightly, and his whole body suddenly erupted with even greater manifest energy. In an instant, it rushed towards the right fist seal, and at the same time, Uvijin, whose face was full of excitement, was uncontrollably pushed back. Still too stiff. Uvijin. Calm words rang out. Uvijin's expression changed drastically as he was retreating, because Huang Quan, who was supposed to be in front of him, disappeared. Before he could react, a punch covering Jian struck him on the right side of his back with lightning speed. Cough. His body suffered cross impacts from front and back, causing Uvijin to spin on the spot uncontrollably for several times before falling heavily to the ground. At this time, Huang Quan stopped attacking, looked at the slightly embarrassed Uvijin, and adjusted his sleeves lightly. In this punch just now, he used the flow application technique to gather part of the qi from other parts to the fist seal. And Uvijin, who only used hardness to averagely cover his energy volume, was already injured as expected when he suffered an attack that was higher than hardness. Of course, in this kind of sparring scenario, Huang Quan would naturally not attack with a qi volume that far exceeded the opponent's. If we really want to measure it, the average value is 50 when two people use firm. However, at that time, Huang Quan, who used flow to adjust the airflow concentration, added 10% to the fist seal. Around 60 to 65. In this way, there is a difference in Jian, and the person who is hit will naturally be injured. Cough cough cough. I'm just right here, can't you attack other parts? While coughing, Uvijin pressed the right side of his waist, resisting the pain in his waist, and looked at Huang Quan speechlessly. At this time, he doesn't know flow and condensation, so he doesn't have the consciousness and control to instantly condense manifestation qi on the defensive part to carry out specific defense. So, you have to get hurt when you should. Fortunately, the ribs around his waist have not been exercised again. Obviously, the presence of Jian has blocked part of the attack, and his own physique also has a certain defense bonus. This is the importance of intelligence. Huang Quan responded with a meaning, and his feet suddenly erupted, making his figure attack Uvijin like a rushing arrow. Now that the opponent's strength has been figured out, this slightly boring battle should be over. Well done. Seeing Quan take the initiative to attack, Uvijin showed a ferocious smile on his face, and rushed directly towards the oncoming Huang Quan without any hesitation. For him, a fist-to-fist fight was the most exciting thing for him. Reckless man. Facing Uvijin, who clenched his fists and hit him on the head, Huang Quan pulled down a black line on his forehead. The 3-point force left in the attack allowed him to instantly change the direction of the attack. After dodging the opponent's double fist attack, he rushed forward quickly. Flash into Uvijin's belly. At the same time, Huang Quan's prepared right hand clenched into a fist, and the middle finger protruded quickly like an iron nail. Then, under the mobilization of flow, about 70% of the manifestation qi condensed in the fist seal, superior. In an instant, boom, following the close-range blow, Uvijin's eyes protruded and his body was knocked away again. Phew. In midair, blood kept rising from his throat. Unable to swallow, Uvijin raised his head and spurted it out, forming a thin mist of blood. Boom. Uvijin fell heavily to the ground, and the corners of his mouth were stained with blood. He lay on the ground in a daze. Regarding this battle, although he thought that he might fall behind the opponent, he did not expect that the gap would be so big. The control of thoughts is too rigid and dull. Adjusting his sleeves, Huang Quan dispersed the hardness around his body, weakened the release of qi volume, and reformed the tangled state. After all, Jian is a high-level combined application technique of Lian and Tang. Although it can emit and maintain the maximum manifested energy of oneself, it consumes a lot of one's own physical strength and qi. For the weak, when there is no fighting or practice, firm is naturally used as little as possible. You guy. After coming back to his senses, Uvijin, who was lying on the ground with a gray face, turned to stare at Huang Quan for a while. Then, he struggled to get up helplessly, waved his hand and said, "That's it for today. If we continue to fight, the old injury will probably relapse." "That's right. Why do I cover my body with qi and still feel so much pain after being hit by you? It's like being hit by a garbage truck. Use absolute to recover." Seeing that the other party was just sitting there, Huang Quan said calmly, "As I said before, your control of Nian is too rigid and you can only distribute qi evenly throughout your body. In this regard, Those who are weaker than you will naturally have an advantage, but when facing a slightly stronger nen, as long as the opponent increases the chi volume on a certain part of the body when attacking, it exceeds your average chi volume. Quote, "You have tasted the result now, and this is without my full strength." The words fell. Uvajin shook his head, looking vaguely understanding. "So that's it. No wonder I can't defend against your attacks. It's a control problem." After taking a glance, Huang Quan shook his head slightly and turned to look at Maki and the others who were approaching. "What about you? Do you want to try a battle between nemesis?" "Forget it." Shalnark fiddled with his phone, rolled his eyes and said, "Even a big guy like Uvajin can't beat you. How can I be your opponent with my thin arms and legs? By the way, you and Krollo both said that Nen is ever-changing. If I connect Nen with my mobile phone, will it work?" "Huh, did you think of this aspect so quickly?" Looking at Shalnark in surprise, Huang Quan thought for a while and nodded. "Yes, as long as your will is strong enough, thought will respond to your expectations." "That's not bad." Shalnark smiled slightly, looked at the remodified mobile phone in his hand, and said, "I have thought of a good ability during this period, and I suddenly want to try it." "Then go try it and see." Huang Quan looked at Shalnark and said meaningfully, "Do you still remember my explanation of emitter? In addition to the manipulation of living things and energy, you can also control yourself." "You mean, I understand." Upon hearing this, Shalnark's eyes lit up, as if he had thought of something. He turned around and ran towards Meteor Street. "I want to come up with an interesting idea, so I'll go back first." See this. Uvajin and others looked on speechlessly. However, Shalnark has always liked to indulge in research, and they have long been accustomed to electrical appliances such as mobile phones and computers. "Brother Quan, help me wake up Nien too." Next to him, Shizuku pulled Huang Quan's sleeves and looked up at him pitifully with his cute little face. "I don't want to do any exercise to wake up. It's really boring. And it's not useful at all." "Your age." Huang Quan, who looked at Shizuku with condescension, stopped talking within a radius, with a surprised expression on his face. Because in condensation's observation, the life energy around Shizuku was more than twice as rich as before. This means that the other party has indeed achieved some results through methods such as meditation. Think of this. Huang Quan bent down, looked directly at the petite Shizuku, and said slightly seriously, "Do you believe me?" Shizuku. "Ah ha ha." Shizuku nodded quickly and said, I believe it 10,000 times. As long as Brother Quan helps me wake up Nien, I will definitely listen to Brother Quan in the future. I can help you wake up Nien, but..." Looking at Shizuku, who was about to get excited, Huang Quan interrupted without mercy, "Only if you can come up with a special Nen. Whether it's powerful, strange, or rare, as long as your idea satisfies me, I will wake it up for you myself." "Then it's settled." Shizuku jumped for joy, patted his petite chest, and said confidently, "If you are so smart like me, you will definitely be able to get along with Nen, who is particularly powerful. Just wait, Brother Quan." After saying that, he ran to a rock not far away and sat down, eating brown sugar and thinking carefully. See this. Maki's cold expression showed some hesitation, and said, "Izumi, didn't you say that Shizuku was too young and would be unable to control the loss of chi and it was too dangerous, so you didn't wake her up? Wouldn't it be a little bad to suddenly agree to her now?" "Do not worry." Regarding Maki's concerns, Huang Quan smiled and said, "Not to mention that Shizuku doesn't even know what his attribute system is. But one thing is certain, she has a very suitable talent for Nien and she may spontaneously awaken Nien at any time." "Can't understand." Maki tilted his head and glanced at Huang Quan strangely. "I'll just listen to you. Anyway, Shizuku is very forgetful, and he probably won't remember it after a while. Hello, have you had enough chatting?" Nobunaga, who was holding a wooden knife next to him and had been trying to interrupt, saw that the two couldn't stop chatting, and suddenly said impatiently, "Do you want to fight again? Izumi, let me do it this time. Let me see where you are better than Uvajin. Then come on." Hearing this, Huang Quan narrowed his eyes and waved to Maki, Uvajin and others next to him, signaling them to give up the fighting field. Bang bang. Careful. After regaining his composure, Uvajin wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, patted Nobunaga's left shoulder, and put an appropriate distance away from Maki. It seems that Nobunaga is also an enhancer. Glancing at the wooden knife in the opponent's hand, Huangquan revealed a hint of expectation in his eyes. Although Nobunaga is far inferior to Uvijin in terms of physical fitness, he is also an enhancer, unlike Uvijin, who likes to strengthen himself. Most of the things he strengthened with thinking hit the weapon and sword. This means that Nobunaga often uses weak instead of firm. As an advanced application skill of Tangle, the application of Jo greatly expands the range of Tangle, allowing all objects in physical contact to be strengthened by one's own thoughts. For example, if you use Jo to cover a stone, the hardness of the stone can be enhanced, so that the stone can continuously break other stones without breaking. And if it is used on a shovel, the digging force of the shovel will be strengthened, and even digging hard rock will feel as easy as digging pudding. Just like at this moment, the wooden sword in Nobunaga's hand has been wrapped and covered with chi, thus making it greatly strengthened. In that case, I will also choose a weapon. Ignoring the confusion in Nobunaga's eyes, Huangquan's right hand had already reached into the sleeve of his left arm. Next moment, as Huangquan took out his right hand from his sleeve, a long and short police baton, about 1 meter long and dark in color and shaped like a spiral fragment, was slowly drawn out. Come. Holding the Black Devil baton, Huangquan waved to Nobunaga calmly. Although after the battle with Uvijin, a lot of potential energy was consumed due to the strong relationship, but this does not prevent another fight. Before he finished speaking, Tang covered Huangquan's whole body, and a thin layer of chi extended from his right hand, using Jo as an application, and wrapped around Black Demon. The reason why I used Tangle instead of firm is naturally because of the differences between Nobunaga and Uvijin, and the decision they made. Not everyone can understand the application skills of Jien on their own in such a short period of time like Uvijin. Then I won't be polite. Knowing that Izumi's strength was superior to his own, Nobunaga did not continue to be polite. While his expression became solemn, he also controlled the unskilled chi to cover and wrap around his body, and nearly 1/3 of the chi was wrapped around the knife. Although Nobunaga didn't know what Jo was, he had a deep understanding through this period of practice that once chi was wrapped around the blade, the strength and sharpness of the knife would be greatly enhanced. Anyway, with a simple response, Nobunaga held the knife in his right hand and quickly closed the distance with Huangquan at a low frequency. When he was within the attack range, a wooden sword light turned into an arc, cutting extremely quickly to Huangquan's chest. Boom! The sound of weapons clashing sounded. I saw that the moment the wooden sword was about to hit Huangquan, Black Devil was used by him to cut off the sword. He put his backhand on his forearm and instantly blocked the weak point of the wooden sword. The next moment, while blocking Nobunaga's long knife attack, Huangquan's forward body raised his prepared left hand and struck Nobunaga's vulnerable abdomen. You think I am Uvijin? Seeing this, Nobunaga suddenly turned his foot and rotated the blocked knife, thus forming a superimposed acceleration and fiercely cutting towards Huangquan's head. Interesting. Withdrawing his left hand, Huangquan looked calm and flipped his wrist flexibly to change the Black Devil held in the back to the front grip. At the moment when the wooden knife was cut, he squatted down to dodge the attack, and the Black Devil in his hand hit Nobunaga directly, of lower limb muscles. Bang! The thick muscles made the sound of being struck by a blunt instrument. The instant tingling sensation, if it weren't for the chi covering it, Nobunaga would feel like his legs would go weak and he would fall to his knees. However, this moment is in the midst of a battle. Resisting the numbness, Nobunaga turned his wrist and held the long knife behind his back, and stabbed Huangquan hard. Sensing the crisis, Huangquan exerted all his strength and flew backwards in a half-crouching position until he was out of Nobunaga's attack range. Then he flipped over to stand in a Black Devil posture, touching the ground. Haven't you been practicing your sword skills during this time? Why don't you compete with me directly? Rearranging his offensive stance, Nobunaga frowned and looked at Huangquan. He has seen the other party's strange weapons many times in the past 3 months, so he knows very well that the other party is best at sword skills, not this mess of stick skills. If you want to see it, it's okay. Hearing this, Huangquan smiled and no longer restrained the chi so that it could be absorbed by the Black Demon. Suddenly, with a slight movement of his mind, the Black Demon in the form of a baton reorganized into a reverse-edged black knife with the blade facing inward. What an enviable weapon. Looking enviously at the weapon that Huang Quan could freely change in his hand, Nobunaga swallowed his saliva and looked at the wooden sword he had cut out in front of him. The difference was really obvious. It's not sharpened, so feel free to fight. After hearing too much of the other party's envy, Huang Quan waved with an unchanging expression, holding the slightly curved reverse blade Black Devil in his right hand and pointing straight at the ground. Give you another chance to attack. Call out. It's amazing to have a good weapon. As he spoke, Nobunaga rushed forward with a knife and stabbed Huang Quan rapidly with multiple thrusts. Huang Quan's eyes were slightly focused. While dodging, the reverse blade in his hand slashed down like ripples on the water, aiming directly at the opponent's neck. Boom! At the critical moment, Nobunaga retracted the wooden sword and placed it diagonally on his right shoulder to block the attack. Then he held the sword in half a circle and turned on the speed-cutting mode. 1 sword. 2 swords, 5 swords. 10 swords. Either cut, split, pick, peel, or chop. Bang 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 bang. The collision between knives continued and became faster and faster as time passed. However, what shocked Maki and Uvijin, who were watching? Faced with such a dense and fast attack, Izumi had no intention of dodging. He just stood firmly on the spot and lightly received every attack from Nobunaga with the black reverse blade in his hand. No matter what angle it was from, he easily resisted it. Quan, why don't you fight back? His breathing was a little rapid, and when he saw that the other party was only defensive and resisted all his attacks, Nobunaga suddenly shouted angrily and swung his sword faster and faster. Bang 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 bang. Quote. In response, Huang Quan did not reply, but still defended calmly and received every blow from Nobunaga. The reason why he did not immediately fight back was naturally because he wanted to see the results of his sword training during this period. Although these are just some basic knife skills, once practice makes perfect, countless changes can be produced, whether it is derivatives or combinations. But for Huang Quan, the most important thing about swordsmanship, in the final analysis, is strength and speed. As long as you have speed and strength that far exceeds that of the enemy, you can naturally end the battle in an instant. As for techniques, turning complexity into simplicity has always been in Huang Quan's mind. After all, this is the world of the ninja, not the world of martial arts. He naturally understands what is important. He has never done anything like throwing watermelons and picking sesame seeds. Now, facing Nobunaga's stormy offensive, Huang Quan extremely calmly wielded every sword technique, whether proficient or unskilled, and quickly absorbed experience and grew under pressure. Although very dangerous scenes sometimes occur, Huang Quan is very happy and enjoys the crisis he is facing at this moment. Just like walking on the edge of a steep cliff, he concentrated on turning all kinds of sword skills into instinct to quickly defend himself through nerve reflexes. Gradually, Maki and others were surprised to find out. Due to the increasing speed of the two people, in the collision of chi and chi, two different air currents faintly emerged between the two. If Nobunaga, who was attacking quickly, formed a cone-shaped airflow phenomenon, then Huang Quan, who had been defending, gradually formed a circular airflow defense circle. For a while, the two sides were in a stalemate like a spear and a shield. Bang bang bang, bang bang bang, bang bang bang. 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 9 minutes. As time passes by, finally, with a large amount of consumption of chi, Nobunaga's sword swing speed gradually slowed down. It was obvious that his physical strength was too much and he could no longer maintain it. Not working anymore. Keenly feeling that the opponent's swing speed began to slow down a little, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, understanding that this battle would end here. Simply not focusing on defense, the moment Nobunaga swung his sword out of habit, Huang Quan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he used the reverse blade Black Demon to block the opponent's wooden sword attack, and suddenly released a huge force. What? In an instant, the right hand holding the knife swung to the right uncontrollably. Nobunaga's pupils dilated and he was about to retreat in an instant. Aha! A slight crackling sound passed by. The edgeless black reverse blade Black Demon pressed against the main artery of his neck in an instant, holding steady and not moving at all. I lost. Looking down at the pitch-black blade that was so close and full of cracks, Nobunaga smiled bitterly and stretched out his hand to push away the Black Demon on the aorta. Since your explosive power is so strong, why are you always in a defensive posture? Winning or losing is not important. What is important is that I learned a lot from this battle. Huang Quan smiled upon hearing this, inserted the black devil into his left sleeve, and reorganized it into a thin gauntlet in a rotating form. Nobunaga, your sword speed is indeed good, but for those stronger than you, it lacks the lethality. I can feel it. Putting away the wooden sword, Nobunaga shook his head and seemed to have some realization. No matter how fast I speed up, I can't break your defense. Judging from the results, it is indeed relatively mediocre. Speed, strength, skill, and specialization. With a subtle reminder, Huang Quan stopped disturbing the other person's thoughts and turned to look at Maki. Do you want to try it? Not yet. Touching the thin threads with his fingertips, Maki shook his head and said, I am no match for you now. As for after I develop Nien, I may be interested in challenging you. Sister Maki, combat experience comes from fighting. Seeing that the other party was still shaking his head, Huang Quan smiled, picked up the black trench coat next to him, and asked casually, when it comes to developing reading, do you have any specific ideas? A little. After hesitating for a while, a little hesitation appeared on Maki's cold face, and he looked down at the filament wrapped in his hand. I want chi to be transformed into thin lines for use. What do you think? Thread. Very good idea. At this moment, Huang Quan couldn't help but think of Doflamingo's thread fruit ability in his mind, and immediately turned his head to look at Maki and asked, where is the direction? Attack type, defense type, or healing type? There are many types of threads, you have to think carefully. Maki nodded upon hearing this, a smile appearing on his cold face. If it were Quan, what direction would it choose to develop? Me. Stunned, Huang Quan thought for a moment and said, if it were me, I should develop it in the direction of attack, restraint and control. For example, the length of the thread, the thickness of the thread, the sharpness of the thread, the tenacity of the thread. Or using the thread to control others like a puppet. In short, the line has many advantages and disadvantages, but when talent is limited, it is better to develop closer to your own line. A brief explanation was given. Seeing that Maki didn't respond, Huang Quan looked at the other party in confusion, but saw that Maki was looking at him with bright eyes, as if he was amazed at something. What's wrong? Huang Quan looked at his body and saw nothing strange, and asked doubtfully, is there something wrong? No. After coming back to his senses, Maki looked at Huang Quan complicatedly and said softly, Quan. You have really changed a lot. If it were you before. I'm still me, aren't I? Interrupting what the other party was about to say, Huang Quan looked helpless and said, besides, I'm taller than you, can you stop treating me like a child? Snort. You may be taller, but you are still my younger brother. Maki rolled his eyes, stood up and compared his height with Huang Quan. Seeing that he was half a head shorter, he suddenly became unconvinced and said, I'm still a few months older than you. My sister is my sister. This is an unchanging fact. Yes. You are right. Huang Quan laughed and shook his head. You will always be my sister, okay. I will start my daily practice next, do you want to come with me? I'd better go see Shizuku first. Maki shook his head and said, the progress of your practice of Nen is far ahead of ours, so I'd better try not to drag you down. Besides, Shizuku is so forgetful, so I can't do it without supervision. After saying that, Maki waved his hand, turned around and walked towards Shizuku not far away. Quote. Glancing at Uvajin and Nobunaga who were also starting to practice, Huang Quan sat down on the rock next to him, closed his eyes slightly, and reviewed and analyzed the previous battle. First, the manipulation of chi is still too raw, and the effect of instantaneous reading has not been achieved. Especially when using flow, there is still an error in the distribution of chi. Second, although chi volume has increased compared with 3 months ago, there is no obvious growth effect. Compared with the improvement of absorbing obsession consciousness, it can be said to be a world of difference. Think of this. Huang Quan couldn't help but look at the devil pattern in his mind. Although he had not absorbed any new telepathy items during this period, his psychiatric capacity still expanded in different ways through his own training. Power system. Nien. Enhancer. Thought capacity expansion 7%, 8%. Conjurer. thought capacity expansion 10%, 12%. Transmuter, thought capacity expansion by 5%. Emitter, thought capacity expansion by 4%. Manipulator, reading capacity expansion 11%, 13%. Trait system, thought capacity expansion 9%. Comma. Perhaps it is because I have been practicing and honing the characteristics of Devil's Gate and Light and Severity in the past 3 months, which has also led to a certain degree of growth in both Conjurer and Manipulator. The only thing that surprised Huang Quan was that the growth of Enhancer was before Trait System, while the long-awaited Trait System did not increase at all. Is it possible to enhance the Trait System only when absorbing thoughts? After thinking for a while, Huang Quan shook his head slightly to dispel this thought. It should be impossible, knowing that his main characteristic, Gate, belongs to the Trait System. Could such a situation be caused by my failure to formulate restrictions and oaths on the Gate? After all, the previous 2 restrictions came from the expansion of thought capacity. Thinking of this possibility, Huang Quan thought for a moment, shook his head and gave up his current plan. Just because there is only 1% left in the Trait System, a thought capacity that can be restricted can be expanded. He wanted to test whether 2 constraints and oaths superimposed together could achieve the effect of doubling the cost of a single. There's no rush. The characteristics of Conjurer and Manipulator are enough at this stage. Dismissing this thought, Huang Quan continued his previous review, analyzing his own strengths and weaknesses one by one, and looking for solutions. Wait until everything is processed. This is the beginning of the day's daily practice. Basic applied skills, advanced applied skills, knife skills training. After only practicing twice in a cycle, the sky began to gradually darken. Izumi, it's getting late. Not far away, Uvijin shouted. If you don't go back, that guy Crollo will definitely not leave any food. For him, besides fighting, eating is the most important thing. Seeing the sky getting dark, Uvijin remembered the meal time set by Crollo, and his expression suddenly became urgent. Let's go. Wiping the sweat from his face, Huang Quan nodded, put away the black demon, picked up his windbreaker and walked towards the crowd. Subsequently, a group of people chatted and returned to Meteor Street. Quite a while. By the time Huang Quan and others returned to Spider, the sky had turned completely dark. After a simple wash, had the same simple dinner as always. Is there anything you want to say? Glancing at Crollo, who was holding a book not far away but had been observing him secretly, Huang Quan stopped walking back to the room and turned to look at him calmly. Otherwise you wouldn't have been staring at me. Is it related to the elders? What a sensitive sense. Closing the book in his hand, Crollo stared at Huang Quan. I can feel that you are getting stronger again. Stop talking nonsense like this. Huang Quan frowned. What's going on? Remember the black jackal? Standing up slowly, Crollo handed the book in his hand to Picanoden, who was standing quietly next to him, and then calmly said. The pack of jackals has already begun to take action. Black jackal. Hearing this name, Huang Quan frowned, and the figure of Shoggoths could not help but appear in his mind. How do you say, their target is us? This is normal. Crollo said calmly. After all, the white wolf Shoggoth disappeared because he attacked us. That guy Shoggoth was able to hold on for 3 months. He is more patient than I thought. According to the information I have received, the northwest corner of East Street has been occupied by them, and their territory is at least twice that of White Wolf. Do you have any information about the ninja? Huang Quan's eyes showed a thoughtful look. Ordinary people don't matter to us at all. Once a battle breaks out, the most important thing is the number and strength of the nin. There are 5 people found in front of us. Crollo said calmly. The specific abilities are unknown, but the strength should not be very strong. Except for the black jackal Shugru, the level of the others is similar to that of Uvijin and others at this stage. Quote. Do you have any idea? Hearing this, Huang Quan turned his head and looked at Crollo, and said calmly, with your character, you must have made a plan by now, right? No one knows me better than you. Crollo smiled slightly and said, it's very simple. I want this battle to be a warm-up battle before the brigade is established. By the way, let's test the progress made by Franklin and others during this period. For Crollo, putting the black jackal before the elders was an attempt to screen out the real team members. As for whether anyone will die in this battle, it doesn't matter to him. Only those who survive by defeating the enemy on their own are the members he expected. Still as cold as ever. After understanding the underlying meaning of the other party's words, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, lowered his head and manipulated qi to change different numbers on his fingertips. I understand what you're thinking. You want me to join you in fighting for the others, right? That's right. Crollo nodded and said with a smile, the information about Shugru's nen and strength is still unknown. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, how about you solve it with me? By the way, do you have too much confidence in me? Huang Quan raised his head and glanced at Crollo, and said slowly, or, you already know my nen very well. Certainly. Feeling Huang Quan's faint aura, Crollo's expression remained unchanged. He stared at Huang Quan and said, I don't understand. It's just that you can easily kill the 4 nemesis sent by the elders in just about 2 minutes. Anyone with some thinking can guess your hidden strength. If you want to continue hiding, it doesn't matter. Spider is supposed to be the one responsible for ending this battle, with or without you. What a low provocation. Huang Quan rolled his eyes, waved his hand, turned and walked upstairs. Let me know in advance when you are going to leave, and I have never had the idea of hiding my abilities, not from anyone. If you really want to know so urgently, defeat me. I will reveal my ability to you. Izumi. It's so interesting. Looking at Huang Quan's back disappearing at the top of the stairs, Crollo smiled slightly, returned to the chair in the hall and sat down slowly. Crollo. A book was handed over to him, and Pike Notan said with a puzzled face, why do you like Zongquan so much? Judging from his behavior, even if he joins the brigade in the future, he is not the kind of person who will obey orders, right? That's what it means, isn't it? Crollo smiled, took the book and turned to the page he had read before. Parker, don't underestimate Kangquan. He is the only guy the first can't see clearly in all these years. He is completely different from the one I met a few years ago. The unknown represents mystery, and this is what I long to pursue. I always feel. Seeing this, Pike Notan hesitated slightly and said, it is not a good thing to bring Quan into the brigade. His personality after recovering his memory is incompatible with Meteor Street. Did you feel it too? Crollo narrowed his eyes, shook his head slightly and said, forget it, he is Maki's brother no matter what. As long as Maki becomes a member of the brigade, even if Izumi does not join the brigade in the end, he does not have to become an enemy. Don't worry, if anything happens, I will solve it myself when the time comes. Having said this, Crollo looked at the book with a cold indifference in his eyes. Although he longs for the mystery of the unknown, this does not mean that he can tolerate the other party's unscrupulous destruction of his plans. Variables are just variables. Once you cannot control them, the best way is to make them disappear. I see. Pike Notan nodded and said, that's right. I already have some clues about the memory aspect of Nen that I proposed before, and I believe it will be developed soon. Really? This is good news. Crollo looked at Pikenoden with a smile on his face. His thief's ultimate intention is among the spiders, and the one who knows it most clearly is Pike Notan, who has been getting along with him all the time. If the other party can really develop Nen related to memory, it will be even more powerful for him. Presumably even a highly vigilant guy like Quan would never have thought that all his secrets would be exposed. It seemed that he was reminded of the scene where Quan's calm expression was torn apart bit by bit. The smile on Crollo's face couldn't help but grow stronger. Beside, seeing the smile on Crollo's face, Pikenoden also showed a rare smile. To her, no matter what happened to spiders or other people, as long as she could make Crollo happy, everything was worth it. Moreover, having read many books like Crollo, she is indeed very interested in memory. If only I could see Crollo's memories. This is the thought that Pike Notan has been hiding and suppressing in his heart. At the same time, Meteor Street, Dongcheng District. In the northwest corner, the Black Jackal Building. At this moment, from the top floor of the white 5-story building stained with many bloodstains, shrill screams kept coming from outside the building. In a simple floor with no decoration, figures covered with bloodstains and bleeding were suspended in midair by rough ropes. And below these figures, there were figures that looked like jackals and human figures with cruel blood in their eyes, waving their sharp claws from time to time, pulling and cutting at the hanging figures. Tear, tear, tear. Along with the shrill screams, the claws swung faster and faster. Quite a while. When all the screams disappeared, the hanging figures turned into corpses. The guys waving their claws gradually stopped. That's it for today. Among the crowd, Shuglu, who was short, muscular and looked like a jackal, licked the blood on the back of his hand and said, "Take the bodies of these guys down." "Yes, XN." As the response sounded, soon, the hanging corpses were dragged down by the black jackal's men. Shugulu, boss, in the corner of the room, looking at the bloody scene in front of him that he was still not used to, the slightly vulgar Blue couldn't help but swallow hard, and carefully handed the other party a clean towel with a flattering expression. Quote. Ignoring the other party's flattery, Shuguru took the towel and wiped the blood on his body, and said expressionlessly, "Have all the spider guys gathered? They're all back." Hearing the other party's inquiry, Blue said in a panic, "We have people who have been watching over there. If there is any situation, we will come back to report at any time." "Boss, do we want to take action now?" "Not urgent." Sitting directly on the special jackal leather sofa, Shuguru picked up the bloody red wine on the table and took a sip, a cold light flashing in his soybean-like eyes. "I remember, you said before that Shoggoth disappeared while going to deal with that guy named Ma Quan, right?" "Yes, it is." Gudong. As if feeling murderous intent, Blue trembled slightly and nodded quickly, "It's that guy from Ma Quan. He and Maki are brother and sister. That's why the Shoggoth boss asked me to follow Krollo and the others to stop and monitor Krollo and the others. Who would have thought that the eldest Shoggoth would never come back? Boss, I think it must be the spider people who did it. Otherwise, that person wouldn't have disappeared without a trace." "You feel." After hearing this, Shoggoth stopped taking off the claw equipment from his right hand and said slowly and casually, "Is it what you want me to listen to?" "No. Don't dare." These words made Blue tremble with fear, and he knelt on the ground without raising his head. He had witnessed the cruelty of the other party with his own eyes just now, and he knew that if he didn't handle it well, he would definitely die a violent death today. At the same time, Blue was also glad in his heart that he did not tell the story about the disappearance of the Shoggoths due to his report when he was found by the other party. After all, so much time had passed, and in his opinion, the Shoggoths might have been killed by Spider's men long ago, and their bodies had been disposed of cleanly. This kind of thing is very common in Meteor Street, and Blue has long been used to it, but who would have thought that when he was about to put his tail between his legs and survive in a low-key manner, he would be directly found by Shoggoth's brother. If he hadn't reacted quickly and revealed all the information he knew, and was stopped by the opponent to save his life, he would probably have been dead. Think of this. Blue's kneeling posture became more and more humble. As for dignity, it is not worth mentioning at all to him. Only when people are alive can they have hope, especially in a place like Meteor Street. If you want to live, you have to sacrifice something. Although he is naturally short in stature, Shugulu's eyes are full of downward gaze at this moment, staring at Blue on the ground like staring at an ant. "You will answer whatever I ask from now on. Do you understand?" "Obviously," Blue said flatteringly. "Your will is the guideline for my future actions." "Climb up." Looking at the other party with disgust, Shugulu played with the sharp claws in his hands and said casually, "I heard that Krollo took Ma Quan with him to find that mountain beast elder in Nanchung district. In the past 3 months, have they been going? Has that mountain beast elder sent anyone to look for them?" "Not at all." Shaking his head vigorously, Blue raised his head slightly and said with fear and certainty, "According to your instructions, I and others have been monitoring the spider group for the past 3 months. What is certain is, they have not looked for the elders during this period, and the elders have not looked for them once. It seems they have nothing to do with Elder Philip." Shugulu frowned and said, "If it really doesn't matter, then it would have been a waste of 3 months of my time. In this case, there is no need for those people from Spider to stay. Dulutes, go and get the jackals below ready, and find a time in the next 2 days to bring the people from Spider." "Yes." In the shadows in the corner of the room, a dark figure nodded and said coldly, "Would you like to live or die?" "Keep the one named Ma Quan." Shugulu used his sharp claws to repair his blood-stained fingernails, and said casually, "Kill all the others." Clear. Du Lutz, whose leather looked like a black man, responded coldly, retreated into the darkness, and disappeared silently. What needs to be done about this guy? At this time, in the shadow of the right corner behind the sofa, a man with pale skin and a black jackal tattoo on his arm slowly stepped out, and a slightly hoarse voice sounded. This guy. Realizing that the other person was referring to him, Blue trembled all over and looked at Shugulu in front of him with a horrified look on his face. But he didn't dare to say the words of pleading, because the other party just said that he could only reply when he asked. "You are smart and hardworking." Looking at Blue, who was silent but full of pleading, the emotion brought about by controlling other people's life and death made Shogru inexplicably happy. He immediately waved his hand to Bins behind him, got up and walked towards the outside. "Give him a chance to awaken, Nyen. If he survives, I will allow you to follow me." Survive. Before Blue could figure out what this meant. Boom! A heavy punch hit him directly in the abdomen, causing him to fly backwards painfully like a lobster until he hit a concrete pillar not far away before he vomited blood and fell to the ground. "Lucky guy. Whether you can survive or not depends on you." As he spoke, Bins wrapped his chi around his body again, looked at Blue expressionlessly, turned around and walked to the sofa to sit down, quietly watching the other person who started to scream. "Ah!" Blue, who was struck by thought, fell to the ground and shrunk like a shrimp. His limbs suddenly opened wide, and the aura nodes all over his body were activated, causing his life energy to drain away quickly. Blue, who didn't know what happened, could only scream to release his fear. However, the flow of life energy will not be slowed down by his screams. Stupid fool. Although he didn't understand why Shugulu valued such a guy, Bin still performed his duties expressionlessly and stared at Blue coldly. Only those chosen by Shuguru are qualified to awaken. Over the past few years, he has been one of the chosen ones. In this kind of awakening with a fatality rate of 99%, he and a few others are lucky, and have witnessed countless people dry up and die due to this. Let me see if you have such luck. Ah, now. What echoed in the room were still screams of fear. Until it gradually becomes weaker as time goes by. Day and night alternate. The next day, 11:30 in the morning. Spider area. Inside the house. Quote exclamation mark quote. Calling Huang Quan and his group who were about to go out to practice, Crollo, who was leaning against the door and looking like he had spent his time peacefully, closed the thick book in his hand and said calmly, "The Black Jackal people have begun to take action." Oh, after hearing this, Jin suddenly said with excitement, "So there will be a battle soon to ask for money, okay. I was so excited about your notice last night that I stayed up half the night." Not only him, but also Maki, Nobunaga, Franklin and others in the room all had murderous looks on their faces. Since the other party dares to attack the spider, be prepared to disappear. How to arrange it? Take the initiative. I prefer to be proactive rather than passive. I think it's better to wait and see, and you can set traps. The number of black jackals must be at least several hundred, right? This is not easy to deal with. 100 people can be called hundreds of people. Are you kidding me? Leave it all to me. For a time, everyone was noisily putting forward their opinions. What do you think? Ignoring the noisy scene, Crollo looked at Huang Quan alone and asked, as if expecting the other person's response, "Quan. To capture a thief, you always capture the king first." Huang Quan glanced at it and said calmly, "Compared to sticking to the situation, I would rather meet some strong ones among the worthy." As soon as these words came out, everyone present fell silent, either excited, thoughtful, calm, or looking forward to. Various emotions appeared on everyone's expressions, and their gazes also fell on Crollo and Huang Quan. During this time together, Franklin and others already understand Huang Quan's character. Like Crollo, it is full of individualistic characteristics. But they are so similar that they are not offensive, but instead reflect their unique charm. Just like this moment, if Maki, Nobunaga, Shalnark, Shizuku and others outside the door are unconsciously standing behind Huang Quan, under the sunlight. Then Franklin, Pike Notan, Phaeton and others are in the shadows of the house, using Crollo as an arrow pointing at everyone. The two parties seem to be integrated, but there are signs of separation unconsciously. No one present felt this. Only Huang Quan and Crollo clearly realized this. After all, in the past 3 months, the two parties have experienced hundreds of trial games quietly. Not counting Shizuku, Huang Quan and Crollo not only competed with each other, but also maintained a tacit understanding to maintain a balanced state. No one wants to take action before the exact time comes. So you like to take the initiative. After hearing this answer, Crollo smiled clearly, looked at Huang Quan and said, in that case, how about we each lead a team? Huang Quan raised his eyebrows when he heard this. He did not answer directly, but asked, have you figured out the specific number of black jackals and the number of nemesis? Didn't you refuse immediately? Seeing this, Crollo raised the corners of his mouth slightly and said without looking back, Phaeton, tell everyone the results of the interrogation. Okay. From the back, Phaeton, a short man wearing a black cloak with a skull pattern on his mouth and medium dark blue hair and golden eyes, put his hands in his pockets and said briefly. The number of Black Jackal members is 94, and the number of Nen is 7. 5 of them, including Shuglu, were brought over from North Street. The next 2 were awakened when they invaded East Street. This was tortured from existing personnel. As for whether there are still hidden Nin people, it is unknown. After saying that, Phaeton lowered his eyes slightly, with a cold expression and remained silent. Everyone has long been accustomed to this. This is the information collected so far. The smile on Crollo's face gradually disappeared, and he turned to look directly at Huang Quan with calm eyes. What do you want to ask? What's the situation of the opponent's weapons and equipment? Ignoring the opponent's excitement, Huang Quan thought for a moment and turned his head to look at Phaeton. With everyone's current Nen level, once the opponent has too many hot weapons, even you and I won't be able to withstand it for too long. Not many guns, Phaeton said coldly. The firearms in Meteor Street are basically controlled by the 4 Beasts Elders. It is impossible for these guys to bypass the Elders and trade with outside gangs. The information obtained so far shows that Black Jackal's people are basically equipped with self-made grinding and welded claws. For them, fighting in close quarters is the most enjoyable process. In that case, Huang Quan looked at Crollo and said calmly, just like you said, let's divide into 2 groups. It's just that such a boring battle is too boring. Are you interested in adding some bonuses? Lottery. Crollo narrowed his eyes slightly and touched the book with his left hand. What lottery do you want to set? It's very simple. After scanning the crowd, Huang Quan smiled slightly and said, which team will take down Shugru's head first, and the other team will be responsible for doing the dishwashing and laundry work for the next month, how about that? Well, hearing this, not only Crollo's eyes were stunned, but also everyone nearby who vaguely noticed that the atmosphere between the two was not right couldn't help but smile in surprise. A simple sentence directly broke the serious atmosphere that had gradually solidified. What a boring lottery ticket. Crollo shook his head with a smile and said, then it's settled. I hope the result will be that we lose. Having said that, without discussing the specific personnel allocation, Crollo handed the book in his hand to Pike Notan, crossed with Huang Quan, and said calmly. Let's move on time at 7 p.m. Is it okay? Very reasonable. Considering that the weather has changed slowly recently, Huang Quan thought for a moment, CCDH nodded and said, I need basic information about Black Jackal. Pike Notan will send it to you in a while. As he spoke, Crollo's figure walked up the stairs and disappeared. What a confident guy. Glancing at the place where the other party disappeared, Huang Quan glanced at everyone in a daze, said nothing, turned and walked towards his room. For a moment, everyone left behind looked at each other, wondering what kind of riddle these 2 people were playing. Let's go. Seeing this, Shalnark fiddled with his mobile phone and said casually, those 2 guys have settled the matter. If you have any opinions, please mention it as soon as possible. Anyway, I don't have any objections. The most important thing is grouping. To put it bluntly, the reorganization proposed by Crollo is about to begin. Those who want to be the leaders should think clearly about whether they can compete with these 2 A's in terms of IQ and strength. Quote. Cut. Uvajin was unhappy after hearing this and said, I think being strong is the most important thing. Besides, even if you want to create that illusion, you don't have to listen to anyone, right? It's a phantom. Franklin glanced at it and said calmly, since it is about to be reorganized, it is natural to formulate corresponding rules. If it is still as unorganized as before, what is the difference between it and the current spider? That's right. Phaeton looked cold and said. But, as people of Meteor Street, overly strict rules will be a long-term torture for us. I don't care who gets up in the end, if the rules are too strict, I can't accept it. The two of them must have considered this a long time ago. Looking at the decent mobile phone that was gradually modified in his hand, Shalnark seemed to mutter to himself, this is what I mean, besides strength, the most important thing is the overall situation. Only a fool would do something that wants to be the head of the future and decide on it with a slap on the head. We have been together for so many years, to put it harshly, the cooperation between each other is very pleasant, and we have struggled to survive together. Whether to stay or go next will be a choice that everyone present will have to make. The outcome is unknown for now, but I believe that those who waver will definitely be abandoned. These few words made everyone standing there look thoughtful. Even Uvajin and Nobunaga, who have always been simple-minded, showed contemplative expressions. Shalnark's analysis is correct. There is still about a month left before the brigade is officially established. The result is unknown, the head is unknown, the rules are unknown. Many unknowns, like half-open blind boxes, have been placed in front of everyone. There are only two things they can do next: leave or stay. Choosing to leave means that partners who have been together for many years will gradually drift apart, and eventually become alone and embark on other paths. And choose to stay. Everyone looked at each other and dispersed with some complicated emotions. The blazing sun high in the sky gradually sets as time goes by. Night also slowly comes. Several killing intents rose up from the spider land. Dark night. In the criss-crossing alleyways, subtle sounds of fighting sounded one after another. Poof. As the black light of the sword flashed past, two figures with jackal tattoos fell to the ground with eyes wide open. Whoosh. Stabbing the sharp black demon in the form of a tang knife into the corpse on the ground, Huang Quan stood quietly on the spot, listening to the subtle footsteps gradually coming. Not long after, Maki's figure appears on the right, with a slightly cold expression, and his hands are wrapped with blood-stained hard filaments. One observer on the right has solved the problem. The same goes for me here. At the corner not far to the left, Uvajin and Nobunaga appeared, with excited killing intent in their eyes. Neither of the two people here is worthy. And there are us. Not far away, Shizuku followed Shalnark and ran over quickly. Brother Quan, we also found a jackal here. Shalnark fiddled with his phone and nodded. They are ordinary people with extremely weak combat capabilities. Shizuku. Glancing at the uninjured Shizuku, Huang Quan looked at everyone calmly. You haven't awakened yet. When you are waiting to go to the Black Jackal, remember to follow me closely. Another reminder. Shizuku, who was a little tired of hearing it, responded listlessly with his little head raised. It's so boring to do this every time and not take the initiative to help yourself awaken. Spring. Uvajin hesitated and said, the guys who secretly observed us have been eliminated. When will we go to the Black Jackal's territory? If we don't hurry up, Crollo and the others will all finish us off. Not in a hurry. Pulling out the long sword, Black Demon, Huang Quan turned his head and looked at Shalnark. Time. 6:35. Looking at his phone, Shalnark answered without raising his head. There are still 25 minutes until the agreed time, and the normal journey to the Black Jackal's territory takes about 20 minutes, so I am a bit rushed. They all maintain the state of entanglement. Putting the Black Devil into his windbreaker, Huang Quan thought of the map route he had written down before, and determined the shortest straight line distance. Open black lens bracket Devil's Gate close black lens bracket. In an instant, books with pure white and emerald green patterns appeared. Seeing this, Shalnark and others couldn't help but be a little confused, wondering what the other party was doing with the ability book so early. Anyway, during the 3 months they had been together, they had some knowledge of the 6 elements of FA, but they really didn't know what effect Quan and Crollo's Nen had. Just save some time. Huang Quan had no intention of explaining. After all, the battle between Nin and Nen was always a battle of intelligence. The fewer people knew about the specific abilities, the better. But that doesn't mean he will always hide his Nen. Sometimes proper display can also enhance the mystery of ability. Open black lens bracket air door close black lens bracket. As Huang Quan's right hand points towards the empty air. In the shocked expressions of Maki, Nobunaga and others, a solid and transparent door of air appeared in front of them. Crunch. Gently pulling the door handle and pushing open the rectangular air door, Huang Quan turned his head towards Shizuku and gestured. Find you a VIP seat with the best view to go in and take a look. I don't. Hearing this, Shizuku shook his head like a rattle. I want to go with you. There's a bunch of food prepared inside. Directly interrupting the other party's refusal, Huang Quan smiled and said, besides, Maki and the others will come in soon. A bunch of food. Shizuku, who only heard these words, ran in with eyes shining. See this. Huang Quan smiled and looked at the other 4 people. Are you going to set off with me, or are you going to take a rest? Anything is fine. Shalnark looked at the air door with interest and said, I'm quite curious about what it will look like inside. Me too, Nobunaga said in surprise. Izumi, your nen is weirder than I thought. What is behind this door? I always feel like something is weird. Then let's set off together. After closing the air door, Huang Quan held the devil's door and ran quickly in the direction of the black jackal with a calm expression. There is not much time. If we continue to talk nonsense, Crollo and the others really need to take action in advance. See this. Maki and others immediately followed. Ta 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 ta. Ta 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 ta. However, it didn't take long. When Shalnark watched Huang Quan running in the direction of the black jackal in a straight line, he couldn't help but frown slightly and shouted behind him. Quan, the alley in front of you is a dead end. If you want to go to the roof, you will be easily spotted by someone who is too conspicuous. Follow me. With a brief response, Huang Quan led the confused people and quickly ran into the dead end. Immediately, with everyone's stunned expressions, he opened a door directly on the wall of the dead end. And it shuttled through without any hindrance. Unable to help but utter an exclamation sentence that he learned from Quan, Uvijin ran after him and looked at Huang Quan's back with envy. What the hell is Izumi's nen? How can it be so convenient? Yes. Recalling the previous black demon, Nobunaga looked at the long knife he was holding and said slightly speechlessly, every time I think of Izumi's knife that can be freely reorganized, I have the urge to rob him. Stop talking so much nonsense. Maki glanced at Nobunaga and the two, adjusted his breathing while running, and his tone was still cold. These are all abilities developed by Quan himself. If you envy and want it, just develop it yourself. Don't let me know that you are going to bully. How dare you? Uvijin and Nobunaga turned their heads away speechlessly. This guy is really a complete control player. I don't even think about whether they can beat him at this stage. To be precise, it would be good if they don't get beaten by the opponent. Accelerate. From the front, Shalnark said without looking back, Quan is starting to speed up, you guys should talk less. The distance is so close, are you afraid that Quan won't be able to hear it? 0. Well, feeling that Quan's speed had indeed increased a lot, Uvijin and others were speechless and increased their own speed. For a moment, their breathing, which was relatively even at first, began to become slightly hurried. The front. Huang Quan glanced at it, but did not slow down or speed up. Since they were so interested in chatting while running, they probably didn't care about a proper acceleration. That's all. When Huang Quan encountered a wall, cut through the wall, and detoured around the house, he had covered more than half of the black jackal's route in a short time. However, when Huang Quan opened the wall door and led everyone to by it. Click, click, click. The sound of bones breaking suddenly sounded. Hearing this voice, everyone who was slightly wary turned their heads to look. However, they saw a young man with red hair breaking someone's neck and looking at them in surprise. Especially when he saw Huang Quan, a look of surprise suddenly appeared in his eyes. Oh, it's you. The red-haired boy looked at the door that disappeared behind everyone in surprise, and asked with great interest, what kind of ability is this? It can actually open doors on the wall. How did you do it? Uvijin and the others were slightly tense, as if Izumi would immediately kill them if they identified them as enemies. Not an enemy. After waving his hands to the people behind him and making it clear, Huang Quan looked at the red-haired boy who looked like Hisoka and said calmly, this is the second time we have met, what do you call me? Thor. Seemingly seeing Huang Quan's leadership position and feeling the sense of crisis brought by the people in front of him, Hisoka raised the corners of his mouth slightly and responded. What about you? You don't want to keep it secret, right fan? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.